Hello and welcome to the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. And this is episode number 328, where we are going to cover two full reviews going into Sony's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and also Warner Brothers' Aquaman film. And on here we have the debut of a very special guest. You may have heard him on Call of Duty when we do our Nights of Gaming. You also may have heard him on the Suicide Squad podcast. Suicide Squadcast, I think, is what it's actually going as. But here we have Jesse joining us for these two reviews. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing really good. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you helping us out with the reviews. I was able to see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but Kelli was only able to see Aquaman. She may join us later on in tonight's reviews, so stay tuned for that. For now, we've got myself, Daniel, one of your hosts on the Reasons I'm Broke podcast here. If this is your very first episode, typically we do cover a lot of DC news, or in this case, we have Sony coming in strong with the Spider-Verse. But on your side, Jesse, being that it's the first time that the Brokehead Core are hearing you, at least on the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, what is your experience with the things that we love, with the reasons that we do have, the reasons that make us broke?
Oh, it's just because I can't stop spending my money on all of this nerd stuff that I love so much. I started getting into comic books in middle school. I got into the scene a lot more in high school. Ever since then, I've been collecting comics, been collecting toys, figures. I've been playing games pretty steadily since I was a kid. I just love everything to do with this culture, good and bad, because we all are just a big part of it. But yeah, I really love this scene. I love learning and collecting, reading. It's just so much fun, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
As we go slowly into the Spider-Verse review, just so that the listeners the Brokehead Core get a good idea on where you sit on a lot of these modern superhero movies, what is your stance on what Warner Brothers has been doing with the DCEU and how it contrasts with the other superhero movies we're getting from, for example, Disney, Fox, and Sony?
It's so hard to say because I think in the beginning they sort of had a centralized vision. And then as the movies came out and as the genre and the zeitgeist changed, their plans sort of evolved and adapted for better and for worse. So I will say that when it comes to the current DCEU, I really love everything that's involved, from Zack Snyder up to Aquaman. We all know that there was a huge valley with Justice League, but even that, I mean, if you'd have a couple of kids and they just want to see some big, colorful action, I mean, I can't take that away from them. I really love the fact now a lot more that DC is letting the heroes stand on their own, as opposed to some of the other companies and what their plans are. Sony for a long time was just hoping for the best, is what it felt like. But now with Venom out and now with Into the Spider-Verse, it feels like they're letting their characters breathe. It feels like they're letting their creative teams have a lot more independence. And then when it comes to Marvel, I think that there's a large part of this audience that knows that they're very formulaic, they're very popcorny, very for the masses. But as a big comic book guy, it is a little disappointing. But again, if there's a kid like, my nephew or any of my family members that just love Iron Man on the big screen, just love these heroes, I mean, I can't take that away from them, even though some of the decisions are a little sketchy. But I'm really happy with the superhero genre in general, even though there's quote unquote so much superhero fatigue.
Man, there's nothing that I disagreed with there. You're fitting in perfectly to what the listeners are used to hearing. So this is awesome. I love that. The Spider-Verse with Sony, does it feel like they are kind of, you mentioned letting their characters breathe and stand on their own. Does it feel like they're really kind of regaining that strength that they had back with the Raimi trilogy with this year, 2018? Is that not the year of Sony and their superhero world?
I really, really think so. And they had such a gift put in their laps with Miles Morales. He's such a character of the times, and it's somebody that a lot of people could latch onto, especially considering that Black Panther came out earlier this year. There's a lot more civil, and not to get too political, but we are in the middle of a civil rights movement of sorts. And seeing these kinds of characters, seeing this kind of representation, it is important and it is nice, especially since Miles Morales is a mixed heritage. And there's a lot of people in my family, and I'm assuming yours as well now, that fit into that, what's the word I'm looking for? Group of people that it's aimed at. I forget the term. But yeah, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that demographic that they're really trying to hit, especially now in the year 2018. And just so that the listeners know, what would be your nationality or your background?
I am of Mexican heritage. Both my parents, one is from Juarez and one is from Zacatecas. They came to here. They migrated here, and they did become citizens before the 2000s. And I myself was born here, so I am American of Mexican heritage.
Yeah, very similar on my end as well, except for me, it's my dad, Michoacan, and then my mom is from DF, and then exact same story, migrated up, got their citizenship, and I was born in Chicago. So it is really fun to see someone like Miles. And yeah, we're diving into it a little bit early before we go into some of these credits, but seeing Miles on the big screen, not just being handled as he's speaking Spanglish. No, he has full sentences, full conversations with even the villains like Scorpion and his mom in Spanish. So they took extra care in making sure that they established that this is not just a black character, he's also a brown character.
Yeah, they don't shy away from that at all, and it is important to see as he evolves, because if you're a fan of Miles in the comics, you will see things like holidays that he celebrates, traditions that are in his family, the reverence he has for his family members. It's going to become more and more important. So getting those baseline levels of this is just a normal kid, this is what normal is now, whether people agree with it or not, is super important.
Leia, let's start diving into the review. First off, the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Other way. Do animals talk in this dimension? Because I don't want to freak him out.
Directed by Bob Persichetti, and this is his directorial debut. I did not see any other directing credits, but he's not alone in this, as he does have Peter Ramsey from Rise of the Guardians and also Rodney Rothman, who also, this is the very first big feature debut for. So it seems like Peter is really there to help guide these two who have plenty of writing experience and experience in animation, but in all three directing this massive project.
Yeah, it really feels like a big community effort. Because even if you look past the credits, if you're just even taking a cursory glance at Twitter, you'll see that the animators are getting just as much attention, and they're giving all this cool behind the scenes stuff, all these little tips and tricks that they did with the music and how they got certain characters to move and be shaped the way they are. It felt like a group of people made this and not just one person. So I think your theory is spot on.
Spider-Verse is also written by Phil Lord, who worked on the awesome The Lego Movie, and also written by one of the directors, Rodney Rothman, who wrote 22 Jump Street. Did you get any hints of the Lego Movie in this? I know the animation for sure has that sort of pseudo stop motion look to it.
Yeah, I think the writing really came out when it came to the relationships. Because even though I mean, Lego Movie is hilarious, I will stand by that, and I think it's very, very funny. But the parts that stick with you are when he's with his dad, when he's dealing with these different relationships. So I think that really comes out in the writing more so than necessarily the comedy.
And of course, we also have our stars in this, Shameik Moore from The Get Down, Jake Johnson on The New Girl, which I almost had caught up on every episode, but it fell off at some point, Haley Steinfeld from True Grit, and Mahershala Ali from House of Cards, played Remy in House of Cards. And this is, you got a mix here of up and coming, and then someone like Remy who killed it in the role for Spider-Verse. None of these talents, I felt, were weaker than the others. They were all strong and spot on.
Also, because I feel like the audience will be remiss if we don't mention it, I'm pretty sure Spider-Man Noir was Nicolas Cage, which
Of
is
course.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, he did a interesting job with that too, in which he does kind of jump from back and forth in his regular kind of line delivery, and then into sort of that type of era. I don't know the name for it. It's like Cagney, I think is what they call it, but he jumps into that a little bit as he's performing.
Yeah, he's doing his own like monologue, his own narrative out loud. It was very, very funny.
As of December 23rd, Into the Spider-Verse has a worldwide gross of $129.6 million against a production budget of $90 million. So I figured, Jesse, the way that we can break this down, the review is, and this is the way Kelli and I do it, is we go through the story first, not necessarily summarizing it, but kind of critiquing it or thinking about it or really discussing it. And then we head into the acting from all the characters and how they relate to the actors. And finally, we lump together the directing and the special effects. And we do a rating of 5. And the way I always rate it is I rate it as far as like where it stands as a movie, where it stands compared to my favorite movie of all time, regardless of genre. Whereas Kelli usually reviews it based on how much she enjoyed it. And there's no right or wrong way, but just so everyone knows, if I'm like raving about a movie and I give it 2 stars, that's the reason why. What should we do it out of 5, Jesse? Out of 5 what? Not stars, but we got to theme it up to Spider-Verse.
I think it would be appropriate if we did 5 finger points. And if you watch the after credits, you might understand what I'm talking about.
There you go. And we are going to go through spoilers in this review. So if you have not seen Into the Spider-Verse or Aquaman, we do recommend going through, watching those movies if you'd like to see them first, and then coming back and joining us on these reviews. So moving forward, it is spoiler territory. The plot itself, as you mentioned, we follow Miles Morales, who comes straight out of the Ultimate Comics universe by Brian Michael Bendis, Sarah Pichelli, who get plenty of nods throughout the movie, plenty of Easter eggs on. And as you said, it does reflect the real world situation that a lot of students like Miles might be struggling with, such as the boarding school and playing that lotto of this. If you get your number pulled, this is the future of your child. This is your likelihood of your offspring making it in life and really succeeding depends on this lottery. And they touch on that a little bit, but not so much as in the comics. It wasn't as much a plot point in this as I personally would have liked, since it was almost the entirety of the first issue in the comic.
Yeah, it was very streamlined, and I kind of forgive it for that because of the amount of content they're pushing through here. I mean, I'd love more Mary Jane. I'd love more Aunt May. I'd love more of Miles and his dad, Miles and his uncle. I'd even love some more of the villains that we saw, but there was already so much content that I was really scared that it was going to feel overstuffed or rushed, and it still wasn't. And I really think that's a credit to the writers and the directors.
Yeah, a lot of people have pointed to Spider-Verse as the example to, you don't need a standalone Gwen Stacy movie. You don't need a standalone Miles and a standalone Spider-Ham to have this crossover, to have this team effort movie. You can make a film with all of these characters in under 3 hours and make it work. And this is the movie that proves that. Not everything needs a standalone setup before you have all of the characters teaming up.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with that quite highly.
From the very beginning, you do get the relationship between Miles and his parents and where his dad stands as a police officer on Spider-Man. And as you would guess it, because characters progress from beginning to end, they're going to change, they're going to learn, and they're going to grow. In this case, his dad doesn't like Spider-Man, thinks he's a menace, believes that the cops should really handle these things. Not quite as bad as maybe J. Jonah Jameson might feel about Spidey, but he's definitely not on Peter Parker's side in this universe.
Yeah, and I think they gave him a lot of depth without a lot of exposition, which I was really impressed by. And by that I mean, you can look at it from a very flat perspective. He's a father, he's a police officer. Of course, he's not going to like vigilantism. Of course, he's going to be hard on his kid. But you learn from other characters that he does have a history of breaking the rules. He does have a history of seeing his family take bad turns. He does know what a good and a bad role model is, and taking his and this is again, I think, from our experiences as Mexicans, I guess. That we can see that growing up, there's a lot of expectations on us, and that's because our parents want to see us achieve something they couldn't, which is what I think a lot of what his dad wants.
Exactly, and also avoiding, as you said, the type of family misdirection that his brother in specific, was it Uncle Aaron, took in throughout his life. And because of that, Miles does seem to trust in his uncle in, really letting that other side of him go, or really expressing himself to his uncle. And it's all symbolic in the way that they go out at night and they literally graffiti all over the city, and his uncle encourages this, and he encourages the side of him that's not as structured as this boarding school or as his father, who is a police officer.
And also, to his uncle's credit, I mean, it's a really nice gesture that's how he decides that he wants to let his nephew show his creativity, because in other families it could have been partying, it could have been much more irresponsible. So I don't think that Aaron is a flat character either. I think there's a bit of depth to him as well, even though it's not overt.
Yeah, I think that was the most clear when he says that he and his dad, he and his brother used to actually do this when they were younger. So it's kind of like he's also himself touching back on that relationship, trying to find that relationship again that he used to have with his brother, but now he's having through his nephew.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
This is where I thought the story got a little bit messy, and it's not a perfect story, but where we have the spider that bites Miles does seem to sort of kind of show up out of nowhere. And I understand that it has to do with them messing with the universe, the experiments that they're trying to build. And as we go into Kingpin, that's kind of where we get our answer. I know in the books they tried to, or Bendis made it more organic, where it comes from the same lab where Osborn is trying to replicate that same formula or that same spider, but then his uncle ends up bringing it home with him, and that's where Miles ends up picking up that trait. In this case, they're doing artwork, and then it just happens to pop into existence. At least that's the sense I got based on the animation that they gave the spider, and from there it bites Miles, and we have our Spider-Man.
Yeah, I could definitely see it that way as well. I also thought it was really interesting that Kingpin took as large a role as he did, and that it wasn't another rehash of a Green Goblin story or a story we've already seen before. I really enjoyed that aspect.
Yeah, that's something I wasn't expecting either, that Wilson was the main villain in this. And then on top of that, in less than 30 seconds, they gave us his backstory, why he's doing this, the why, and we sympathize with him. It's about his wife and son essentially discovering his workings, his life, his business, and fleeing in terror or for safety. And because of that, they end up getting to a car accident, and now he's trying to recreate his family or undo the mess that was that by trying to bring in alternate versions of these two characters into his universe.
Yeah, it's going to be a recurring theme that there's a lot of sadness in this story, which I don't know if I want to bring it up now, maybe with the recap or maybe when we really analyze Miles. There's a key component when it comes to telling a Spider-Man story, which is there's always tragedy. There's always the punch down. And I think that a lot of characters in this story fill that void. And to make Kingpin one of those, I think that was another good decision.
Yeah, we can go into Miles, since it does tie into a lot of the motivations. So Miles, in this case with his uncle, later on you have the reveal of he is essentially his Uncle Ben in this particular universe. He passes on, he discovers that Miles is Spider-Man, but it's not the type of relationship where, okay, now he has to follow Kingpin's orders and against his own wishes, and there's going to be that struggle. It's like, no, the guy dies seconds after finding out that Miles is Spider-Man, and he essentially tells him, and I thought it was one of the most powerful lines in his particular story is that he points out to Miles that he is the best of both brothers. He is the intelligent young man that his brother is, but then he's also the artistic, wanting more out of life that, Uncle Aaron is. And I thought that was especially powerful. And I think motivation enough of kind of a twisted or ultimate version of with great power comes great responsibility. He is the best of those two characters, and he has to live up to that.
Yeah, and I think because of the abstract nature of that phrase, because it's not as pithy as, with great power comes great responsibility. It doesn't have that same punch, but it's important for Miles' character because the whole movie is about him making a discovery and coming of age. Because a lot of it, I mean, I don't have in my life, I don't deal with kids or teenagers a lot, and I don't watch a lot of animated movies anymore, but it was frustrating to see him just make the same mistake over and over and over again throughout the movie. And when he finally recognizes it, even for me, it was really redeeming of him. It was such a weight off the shoulders to see him make these changes, which I don't know if you want to get into the specifics of those changes or if I should continue being a little bit vague about it.
No, we can jump around in this. Are you referring to the scene where he breaks out of the room in front of Genki and kind of takes that dive to prove not to the other Spider-Man, but to himself that he can be the hero of his universe?
Well, yeah, that's the crescendo of it all, but everything leading up to that, because his whole the theme following him, or there's a word that's escaping me, but his whole pattern is that he runs away. When it comes to him going to his new school, he wants to run away. When it comes to him leaving or exiting the car from his dad, he wants to run away. When he gets embarrassed with Gwen in the halls, he wants to run away. When he's with Spider-Man down underground, he wants to run away. Throughout the entire movie, he's wanting to run away because he's hoping that somebody else will fix it, or that if he ignores it, it'll go away. And eventually, when he does decide to take the leap that he needs to, he accepts that responsibility. And it was so relieving to finally have that. But yeah, his whole pattern, he wants to run away.
In contrast to how he handles that and how the other Spider people look at him and how they see him, did you think that it was a bit too heavy or negative that when it's really revealed that the other Spider people really don't believe in Miles? It's not them testing him and this is how they break him through it. He has to do it himself, but they're also like, no, this kid's too young. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have that moment of standing up and pushing and going forward. And I felt it was kind of jarring. I lost some connection with the other universe's characters in that moment.
I actually felt the opposite way. I was more endeared to them because of that, because in a lot of these movies or a lot of these stories, there's no stakes. There's no real weight to the decisions that people are making. And at that point, when they say, you're not ready, you're not who you want to be, you're not the person that we need right now, they're saying, you've let two people die in front of you. You're doing these same patterns where you're making these bad decisions. And the risk that we're taking isn't just to save our lives. It's to save everybody's. And if we can't rely on you, which is a life lesson that I think a lot of people learn at one point or another, which is if we can't rely on you, we can't have you around. Mm-hmm. We need you to be able to stand on your own before you can try to carry the rest of us.
At what point do you think that they felt that he had reached that point? Is it just that he showed up and he was able to, come in clutch with all the characters? Or when I never felt like they had that moment of, aha, like now he gets it. It's just he showed up, he has a suit, and let's go. And it's almost as if, well, we don't really have a choice. The guy is here, but he knows what we're trying to do.
I think that's a fault of the medium. In a movie, you only have so much time to really get the resolution that we need, and it was rushed. I think we're supposed to just accept that when they see that he can control himself, when he can take that step forward and not run away, when he makes the decision to show up and that he can be somebody that they rely on. I think that's when the turn is supposed to happen. But you're right. It's not a fully fleshed out resolution. But again, I think that's just because it's a movie and it has to happen.
Yeah, and that might be similar to my other issue with Miles's arc here is, and maybe it's a victim of me having read the book. So I've seen that progression. I've seen that jump because they have more time with the comic books and you're really in the character's head. But in this case, do we really know? There is no catalyst to I need to be Spider-Man other than that their universe is Spidey dying, his own Peter Parker dying. And in front of him, just telling him, hey, you're one of me. You're just like me. We need to go do this. Promise me you're going to save the people. Is it just Peter's death that's enough for him to say, I need to be the new Spider-Man? There's a little bit missing there on my end.
Yeah, and I think I had the same frustrations you did there, because that wasn't enough to push him, because he was still running away when the police showed up and he had Spider-Man's body and there was proof there. I mean, they could have gone public. Everybody knows that Spider-Man's Peter Parker. He could have just stayed with the police. His dad's a police officer, but he ran away. When it came to him after the death of their Peter Parker, he went to his home and he was scared and ashamed, and he still didn't say anything. So I think that what the catalyst was a bunch of smaller things. May Parker accepting him, Peter Parker giving him the understanding at the beginning or not the beginning, but like when at the beginning of their relationship, him getting some resolution from his dad, his uncle passing. It was a whole mix of things, which is why I felt it was at least a little bit earned. But I don't think that the Peter Parker death was the only catalyst for him becoming Spider-Man. Because honestly, if there wasn't this huge multiverse thing and those same events happened to a certain extent, I think he still would have hidden his powers and just stayed in school.
Unless these characters, as you said, would have then kind of pushed him in that direction?
Yeah, I think until he learned to grow up and stand on his own, I don't think we would have seen a Miles Morales Spider-Man. Which, now that I think about it, as these thoughts evolve, I see how a Spider-Verse movie really worked well for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other Spider-Man in this universe that I think is the other pushing force for everyone, for the audience too, is the older Peter Parker, the Peter that is divorced, that does not want the commitment. And most characters go through a change by the end of it, as they should. They need to go on a journey here. And in his case, he didn't want that commitment of having a child, and Mary Jane did. And that's kind of where the separation occurred. And what we're led to believe, or at least what I think they were trying to do, is set up this sort of, and he says it very blatantly during the final fight of, oh, you know what, maybe I can have a kid, when he's interacting with Miles, because he's taught him how to use his powers and kind of walked him through it. But I got more of a sense of like a very reluctant teacher, as opposed to the father-son relationship that I guess they were trying to set up for that older Peter. So that's where I also got a little bit let down on, I guess, or I didn't really connect with that particular Peter. But what would you think about that setup or his character arc in this?
I think his arc was supposed to be reflective of Miles's, because even in his own way, he was running away. He thought that he could just escape the multiverse on his own. He didn't want any help. He ran away from Mary Jane after, his aunt, because that is another part of his backstory, was that Aunt May did die. And he lost a lot in that universe. He gave up on his physique, which was a point touched upon quite a bit in the movie. Yeah. He just gave up on a lot of stuff. And in this arc, he also learns that, I have to push forward in some way if any real change is going to happen. So I think he was supposed to have some kind of pitiable aspect as well. Just not to the extent that I think Miles did.
Did you feel that maybe, well, let's go to Gwen Stacy real quick. With her arc is she lost Peter Parker, just like in the comics, who was essentially her Gwen Stacy to Peter's in the universe that we know. But instead, she kind of learns that lesson of people that are near you are going to be in danger, just by nature of the fact that you are Spider-Woman for her. And when she lost Peter and wasn't able to save him, that's when she decided it's best if I'm just distant from everyone. That way, no one I care about can get hurt, or there's less of a chance that people get hurt. And by the end of the movie, we kind of see that she becomes more comfortable in building these relationships and more with Miles. And that's what they hint at by the end of the movie, that, you know, maybe they can be more than friends and maybe they can have a deeper bond and a deeper relationship. Did you feel that her arc was handled well in Spider-Verse?
I think well enough for the number of characters that were in there. I would have liked to have seen more of her. I would have liked to see more of her relationship with the other Spider-Man. But considering that Miles was the first Spider-Man that she met and that she had kind of an idea what's going on, I think what we got was okay. But it's easy as a fan or as a person in this community to say I want more, even though it might not always be the simplest thing.
Yeah, and I think that the Nick Cage's Spider-Man Noir and then Spider-Ham, and then we also have Penny Parker, they weren't as fleshed out. They were definitely cool factors in the story, and each one had their own bit of humor or action or spectacle on the big screen. And I feel like that's what they were more or less there for, as opposed to some kind of connection with the audience.
Yeah, they're a lot flatter than the other characters in the movie. I do appreciate that they gave you that comic book sequence to sort of give you the, you know, this is their tragedy. This is how they mirror the other Spider-Men. And they're endearing and charismatic enough to, you know, win you over, but there's not as much depth to them as the other characters.
As they got to the end of the story and the movie itself, and maybe it's because I watched Daredevil and I wanted, you know, I kind of was rooting for Kingpin, not necessarily to bring his family in here, but the way I expected this to roll out is that one of the Spider-Men explain to him, maybe he sees them start breaking down, but maybe I missed a line somewhere that said that their tech can actually preserve people moving over into their universe. But I did want that realization of, even if I succeed in bringing my wife and son over from another universe, I'm eventually going to lose them again. And once he realizes that, maybe then he would have helped them in breaking down this machinery, but instead he does remain, you know, as the villain, there is no growth on his end as opposed to the other characters.
And I think that his ego and his fatal flaw being that he cannot accept responsibility is what is his ultimate downfall. Because even at the very beginning, the Spider-Man that he murders, he tells him, you know, I know what you're trying to do. It's not going to work. They're gone. He refuses to accept his part in the trauma. He refuses to move on or grieve. He's going through, because I mean, I'm sure we've all lost people and I'm sure we've loved them, but how many of us have created a super collider powered by tachyons to rip a hole in the multiverse? I mean, really? This is how far you're going to go for this? I mean, because that's what he's doing when you take a step back. So he's just not going to change. He's another mirror of them not moving forward, not taking that step, and for him, it's his ultimate downfall.
Do you not think the story would have benefited though in that journey, kind of being tied up with this? I mean, do you really think they're going to use him again in Spider-Verse 2?
Well, I mean, I have a bit of bias because when you kill a Spider-Man, like I'm just not interested in redeeming you. So he did murder Spider-Man. So I'm fine if he doesn't come back.
Yeah, but we didn't care about that Spider-Man. We only cared about the other one.
Yeah, the blonde Spider-Man. That was a weird one too. When I saw him first, I was like, why is he blonde? Is that weird? And then he murdered him. I was like, oh, okay. I guess that's the road we're taking. Jeez, this got dark fast.
Beat him to death.
Oh, yeah, it was brutal. What a way to go in a kid's movie. And then he wasn't the only murder either. In fact, I don't think really the bad guys got murdered very much at all. I'm pretty sure it was just the good guys that got murdered. It's pretty dark.
Yeah, I mean, just Uncle Aaron, but does that count? Is he really a villain?
Yeah, because he's more of like I think that really, now that I'm thinking about it, as the thoughts evolve, that's an interesting story. Because both of us being of ethnic backgrounds, I mean, I'm sure we've seen people close that have made bad decisions, and even though their heart is in the right place, or they're just dealing with the hand that was dealt to them, they get put in these super dangerous situations.
Mm-hmm.
And Prowler didn't murder Spider-Man, but he was just as much responsible in that he was there. But was he as responsible? Was he under the thumb of Kingpin? I mean, we never learned just how bad or good he was, or how much reluctance he had. So that's an interesting character there. And now that I think about it, I wish we would have gotten more with him, but I don't know if he was bad or good. I think that for him, that's a little too simple of a term. But yeah, by the time he died, he wanted to make a change.
Yeah, I think wrapping up the story here that we got, we went through a lot of the arcs of these separate characters, and I think one of the other biggest trusting moments of the film is when Peter, who is the last Spider-Man in this universe at this moment, trusts in Miles to leave. He trusts in him to defeat the Kingpin and to get everything back and to be the Spider-Man of the universe. And then he finally dives back into his own world. And I that might be the moment of where not only Peter, but we know as an audience that this Spider-Man knows, or he has what it takes to keep going, even if it results in his own death.
Yeah. And the big part for Peter there is that he's once again learned to rely on other people, because he just he didn't rely on Mary Jane to be the partner that he needed. He didn't rely on his world at all, to the point that he was willing to commit suicide to escape that responsibility. And now he's finally believing in Miles and relying on him. I think that was a super important part of his journey, whether or not Miles succeeded. But the fact that Miles did succeed, and he did so in spectacular fashion, that ending sequence was just visual candy. I think that really was a great way to do a send-off to this movie.
Yeah, and then at the end, too, we did see his dad kind of grow to trust Spider-Man and saying, I don't agree with your ways, but I forgot what the full line is, but essentially he says we can work together.
Yeah, and I think, because I had a hard time remembering it, I think he heard Kingpin basically confess from where he was standing near the end.
Yes.
So he was able to learn that Spider-Man didn't do it, and learn that these heroes have a place to help him. And he was rooting Miles on, even though he didn't know it was Miles. So he was rooting Spider-Man on. I like that part as well. Also, the hug from Spider-Man was pretty funny. I thought that was pretty cute.
Anything else as we wrap up the story and move into the acting, the talent behind the movie?
Are we going to speak at length on the art direction or the visuals?
Yeah, that'll be in directing and special effects, which will be right after.
Okay, then I think story-wise, a lot of the characters had very similar arcs. I think that was important to see that there's different ways to resolve these stories. I really enjoyed it. There was more depth than I originally put any thought into before I really properly analyzed it. So I think that's why people are reacting to it well. But I really enjoyed it overall. I hope that there's another one.
Definitely. And the voice acting itself, the different talents behind it. I think we had Miles and Peter, who were really the most utilized voices in the film. Now, I really didn't have anything negative to say about these actors as they took on their roles of these characters. I mean, you got the tired sounding Peter, who Jake Johnson has the perfect voice for, an older Peter Parker, and it's definitely something different that we have not seen in the video games and the movies and the TV shows up to this point.
Yeah, I think it was a stellar cast all around. They put a lot of love and a lot of care into these characters. I don't know if it would have worked as well if they put just huge AAA celebrities in each role. So I'm glad that they took the time and put the trust in these actors to really flesh out these characters and bring them to life.
You had wanted to talk about Nick Cage in this. Were you ever like, that's Nick Cage? That's not Spider-Man Noir. I know I was definitely reminded a few times, like, that's Nick Cage again. But that wasn't a complaint. I was like, this is awesome.
I honestly didn't catch it until the credits. Like, I knew the voice sounded familiar, and I just thought it was just a generic actor quirk just doing a noir voice. Once the credits rolled and I saw the name, it really clicked into me, and it made me love it even more. The voice that obviously stood out to me was John Mulaney as Spider-Ham. I think I'm right about that. Because I love comedy and stand-up comedy, and as soon as I heard his voice, I was like, I know that dude. I know that dude really well. Okay, I guess this is the road we're going. And he did an awesome job.
Yeah, he did an awesome Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham. And I really like the way, and we're kind of bleeding into the special effects here, but the way that they animated That particular character, in contrast to the other ones, really stood out as not necessarily someone that didn't fit in this universe. It was still done in a way where, okay, yeah, we have this character running around with these others, but he's more stylized than if you can even achieve that, and they did with Spider-Ham.
Yeah, it felt like a Looney Tunes movie was suddenly inserted into my Spider-Man movie. I really love what they did there, and the little special effects and the onomatopoeias. Yeah, when we get to the special effects and all that stuff, there's going to be so much love for just everything in this movie.
Yeah, let's jump right in, because I think overall the cast was great. We'll sing them praises and nothing negative. They nailed the casting here perfectly, and everything went really well. But the meat and potatoes of this movie is the spectacle that is the visuals, the different art style that they're now patenting the technology, Sony is, for this animation that they themselves created, and that they will now use in future sequels and probably in different movies and franchises. But we have the directing from 3 different people, and then we have the special effects, in which this is a comic book brought to life. And both the way that the scenes move, and also in the way that you see these different styles in the backgrounds and in the characters themselves. You can even practically see the printing lines in some of these scenes.
Yeah, the art direction is just stellar all around. From the colors that they chose, to the time of days at any given point, to the way that the cars themselves were kind of stylized as well. And everybody was unique. I mean, it's hard. When I was in high school, I took like a programming class. And one of the things that always stood out to me was, whenever you see something like this, there's nothing on accident. Whenever you're shooting on film or with a camera, something may be in the background that you weren't prepared for. Maybe, everything was as controlled as possible, but there might always be something there. When you have an animated movie, everything's on purpose. That kid that's 30 feet in the background, that was done on purpose. That bird that's in the sky, that was done on purpose. And just everything that they did here, shadows, lighting, it was just stellar. If they don't get some kind of recognition, it's going to be a disgrace on any kind of judging that's done on whatever award shows there. They deserve accolades for this.
Does this not qualify for the recent Golden Globes nominees where, like, for example, Aquaman was not featured in the special effects, or is this far along enough to where we'll get it in 2019?
I don't know. And it's for 2 reasons that I don't know. One, I'm not too keen on the awards calendar.
Right.
So I'm not sure exactly what days and dates are important in these situations. And then 2, I don't know how the Film Academy on any given level defines special effects, because I don't know where the line is really blurred in this movie between special effects and animation and CGI. It's all done so well, it feels like something new, and I don't know how they're going to decide what category to put that in. I'd put it in as many as I could if it were up to me, but I don't know how these people are gonna handle that.
We all know it's politics anyway, but that's why we have the internet, and we have a voice now, and we can discuss this stuff.
It's really unfortunate. But again, this movie just looks amazing. The flashbacks were great. I really love the design choices, because there was a mix between the Ultimate Universe and the universes we are used to, and some stuff that's completely original. Miles' costume, I don't think we've seen that exact costume before.
No, not at all.
Yeah, that was an awesome looking one. So yeah, I just love it all.
If I remember the comics correctly, the costume is actually done by Genki, who is his roommate, who had a very minimal role in this, which I was a little bit disappointed by. He was more of a punchline than anything, but I'm guessing that they'll use him more in Spider-Verse too. But in this case, it's actually better. I think it's one of the moments in which it's better than the comic, better than the book, better than the original material, in that he spray paints it himself. He spray paints an existing costume from his Peter Parker, from his Spider-Man, and graffitis on it. So it's his expression on top of that he wears. It's him accepting, again, going back to that arc, who he is and who he needs to be. And that's represented in that custom work that he did on Spider-Man.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal choice. I completely agree.
If you were having, let's say we're doing the Oscars, right? And let's say the Into the Spider-Verse ends up winning for best animation, or Is there one scene that stuck out to you? Like this is animation. This is the scene that I remember, that I will remember when I think about Into the Spider-Verse.
It has to be the leap, right? The when he finally has the costume on and he's standing on the skyscraper and he just takes the jump and he's shooting the webs behind him, and you don't know. I mean, we kind of all know that he's going to be fine, but in the moment, you know, you don't know if they're going to latch on correctly. You don't know if he's going to tumble and they're going to make a joke out of it. And and I think they showed it in the trailer, which I think was a travesty. Now that I look back on it, just the camera's upside down. You see him diving, but it looks like he's leaping up. It's really, really cool. I think that scene stands out. If we're looking on a more technical aspect, probably the Super Collider, like at the beginning, just because there's so much going on. There's the Goblin and Spider-Man and a bunch of effects, and he's looking through the universes. But I mean, everybody's opinions might be a little bit different.
No, that's the exact scene I would have chosen as well. And then as a comic reader, near the end, at the end of the movie, when he's jumping through in his Miles Morales suit and his Ultimate Spidey suit, and he's jumping down the cabs and running through the traffic and then swinging by them, that is a scene taken straight out of Ultimate Spider-Man from Sarah Pichelli and Bendis, where they recreated the exact same panels and the same covers in animated format. So that, to me, I was like, that's exactly like the cover. They kind of recreated it in a nice nod to the books. So that would be my second choice, just as a comic reader. But even the one thing I will say about the animation, and I don't know if you had the same warning when you went to see it in theaters, but when they returned my ticket, they're like, hey, just so you know, there's some stylized scenes in the movie that make it look as if the movie is in 3D without the glasses, but rest assured that you are watching the film as it was intended. So they kind of had to warn everyone. And it wasn't until I started seeing it that I'm like, oh, I see what they're talking about. In the background, and this is where I felt that it was maybe a little too stylized for my tastes, is you did see that double and sometimes triple vision in the background. And me, I don't know how you are, but I'm extremely visual with, I used to draw, and obviously I love movies, so I'm trying to pay attention to everything in the background and seeing how they did these things, and then I can't see it. It's blurry. I know we're supposed to focus on the foreground and the characters and the conversation that they're having, but I'm looking at the background and I'm seeing triple vision sometimes in these, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is, again, a stylized choice, and by the time he becomes Spider-Man, or as the movie progresses, everything becomes clearer, symbolic of him becoming more comfortable with Spider-Man and his powers progressing, something like that, but we did not really get that. So were you at all taken out of the movie when noticing those things?
No, it might be because I didn't see it in 3D.
No, neither did I. I saw it in standard.
Oh,
and it had that double vision still.
No, not that anything stood out to me, but I don't really have an art background where I created any real art. If that was on purpose, I would assume it's to make it look more like a comic book, or to sort of have a motif going along where there's sort of a focus that needs to be earned. I'm not sure. I'd have to watch it again, but I mean, that's a great excuse as any to go watch it again. If anybody else is listening and they didn't catch it either, I mean, go watch it and pay attention to the background.
Yeah, do watch it. Give Sony your support. Beef up their Spider-Verse. I don't care. I'm biased as hell. I will root for Sony and their Spider-Verse. I will root for the little guy. I will do it, even though they had 2 big hits this year.
Yeah, for sure.
The actual versions, I know when we get into the different worlds of Spider-Ham and Spider-Gwen, that's another one that also stuck out to me as a comic reader when we see her back in her universe and everything looks painted and watercolored and kind of blurred out. I'm like, that's exactly like the fucking covers in the comic book, in the Spider-Gwen book. That's exactly what we get. So it's like, now I want to get a movie where we visit their worlds, right? We got Ultimate Universe for over 2 hours, I think it was, or nearly 2 hours. Now I want to go into that other universe with Spider-Gwen, where it looks exactly like the artwork in those comics. And they were so careful in choosing to make those worlds look exactly like what we've had set up in the books.
I agree with you. I think I'd want to see a Spider-Gwen universe, like a really long look at that place. I don't know if I could handle an hour and a half of Spider-Ham.
You say
I
that.
just don't know. It might be a little bit too much. I would be happily proven wrong, but just thinking about just the wackiness and the zaniness and just jumping it sounds wild.
I did like the fourth wall breaking of "That's all, folks." And can you say that like copyright?
Yeah,
just a little nothing.
I forgot about that, but I did get a pretty good laugh at that part. I enjoyed it.
Rounding out my review on my end, as far as the criticisms that I had with it, is overall I didn't feel like I connected with a lot of characters. Even Miles, I wasn't emotionally moved by any portion of the movie except for the Kingpin bit, and we got a taste of that, and then I didn't see a resolution that would have satisfied my end. But as you pointed out, this is a despicable character. He's murdered a Spider-Man. He murdered Uncle Aaron. This isn't a character that now that you pointed out, he's not going to get redeemed, and maybe if he hadn't murdered those characters, we could have seen some of that, and maybe the audience would have been more satisfied with that kind of ending. But maybe Uncle Aaron is the character aside from Kingpin that I would have kind of related to the most, because he was, he wasn't upstanding, but he wasn't really despicable at the end of the day. I feel like if Kingpin had not shot him, he would probably have let Miles go. He would have struggled with it, but it's family, and it's someone that he loves so much. But obviously we needed that tragedy with it. So that's my biggest gripe, is probably the story, which was still stellar, which was a great story, but I just did not have that connection with these characters. Animation was fantastic, aside from that bit of background that I noticed every now and again, but then you get lost in the movie and you get lost in the story and the characters that it kind of becomes a part of the movie that you just kind of overlook. And then as we said, the cast is great. What do you think? Did you have any criticisms aside from, maybe them not taking as much time with this, but again, it's a movie, not a comic?
I think the only real criticism I have is, and I don't think it's of the movie itself, it's more of just the type of genre it is. This is a movie that's really built on pathos. You really need to feel for a lot of these characters, because there isn't a whole lot of depth. There's motif, there's arcs, there's full characters, but there's not a whole lot of symbolism or anything to really get to the meat of. It's all presented to you pretty flatly, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not. I think that had they narrowed the vision a little bit more, maybe they could have gotten a little bit more out of it. The art, again, I have nothing but praise for what was presented when it comes to the art or the visuals. But I think under a more singular vision, if they had one director and maybe fewer writers, I think that there could have been a lot more depth to this movie.
So how would you roundabout go with a rating of out of 5 finger points? And point out to the broadcast, how are you rating this? Are you rating this like Kelli, where you go by enjoyment factor, or do you go into overall how it stands in comparison to your favorite movie of all time?
I think I'm gonna review this based off intention, delivery, and enjoyment. So I know what they intended to do. They intended to make a great Spider-Man movie that was a true Miles Morales movie and a love letter to all of the things that make Spider-Man Spider-Man. And what they delivered was pretty much that. And my enjoyment was really high for what they presented. Considering that I do have a little bit more expectation, and there were a couple of small things. Would it be all right if I rated it right now?
Yeah, go for it.
I think I'd give it 4.5 finger points out of 5.
Ooh, nearly perfect.
Nearly perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm gonna go straight into it. 3 finger points out of 5, and again, rating it strictly as a film, as a movie, against The Fountain, which is my favorite movie of all time, which is a perfect 5, a perfect film. In this case, a 3, and I enjoyed it very much. I think this is one of the. It's tough. I hate ranking, things and ranking and comparing it to other Spider-Man movies, because they all had their own different takes and stories and different, using your word there, intention of Spider-Man. But this was, I feel like if I were, because my favorite character is Batman, if I were a huge Spider-Man fan, this would be the perfect movie for me. This would be like my Mask of the Phantasm for Spider-Man fans. So I think it went out there and accomplished a lot of what, maybe if you're a Peter Parker fan strictly and aren't too familiar with Miles, this wouldn't have been the movie for you, because this isn't the Peter that we recognize, and that's all with full intention. This is a Peter that's broken, that's given up, and that is probably an older Peter than we're all used to. But otherwise, it's it's so good to the Spider-Man fans with all the references, all of the comic nods. You have Bendis in one of the phones. I forgot who it was, but you see Bendis and Pichelli, and you see Ditko in there. So there's a lot of nods there for the comic fans too, for any fans of Spider-Man, especially with that end credits scene and with the animated universe of Spider-Man. So I don't know. It's tough to say. I don't know if I can call this my favorite Spider-Man film. I think it's still Spider-Man 1 from the Raimi trilogy, but this was really strong, and I think tons of credit to Sony for really, beating Disney to the punch and giving us a proper Miles story. It's going to be tough to give us a live action Miles, and inevitably they're going to compare it to this film.
Well, the bar has been set pretty high, if you ask me. And I would be remiss if we didn't point out there is a Stan Lee cameo. Mm-hmm. Don't worry, if you haven't seen the movie yet for whatever reason and you're curious and you want to know about that, there is one.
Yeah, I had one customer point out, like, how's Stan Lee in this one if, he passed away? And it was like a weird, I don't know if people think that these cameos are done in like real time or something, like when the movie releases, that's when he recorded. But it's like, we're going to get some Stan Lee cameos for probably at least 2 years, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. I think they said they recorded a bunch of them anyway. And even if he isn't voicing it, I'm sure they're going to put him in there somewhere. But also, that's a weird question. I used to be in retail as well for a very long time, and I mean, we have words for people that ask questions like that. But I mean, more power to him. I guess he'll live a pretty happy life.
Well, that's not the worst one. I think the worst recent one is about Infinity War. I don't know if they think that comic shop people have insight on all these things. Like we're like, no, we've seen this ahead of time. But they're like, so how are they doing a new Spider-Man movie if he died in Infinity War? And I'm like, I mean, are we really asking this? Are they not going to have a Black Panther 2? I'm like, no, they are. I mean, clearly everything's going to be fine by the end of the second one. It's like, I hate to be that guy that tells them, Santa's not real, but it's like, look, man, this is all going to be resolved. This is a part 1 of part 2, and all will be well.
Yeah, and it's all comic book bullcrap. Like they could do anything they want, and it'll be fine. They'll figure out a way to do it. They're not saying goodbye forever. Just give it some time. It'll be fine.
There you go. All right, to summarize it, you gave it 4.5 finger points. I went with 3 on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Definitely give it a watch while it's still in theaters. Go and see it on the big screen. I wouldn't recommend 3D. I'd say just watch it in standard, because I do think that a lot gets lost in the animation when you do go with 3D glasses. So if you can, watch it in standard. But by all means, even if it's just to admire the animation and some of the risks they took in bringing in these different Spider-Man and making Miles the main character, go see it, go support it. We both, I think, strongly recommend this for Spidey fans and for comic book fans.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You have kids are going to love it as well. It'll definitely hold their attention.
All right, let's head into the DCEU, the movie that, according to bloggers and reviewers, might have saved the DC Universe. After Wonder Woman also saved the DC Universe. And after Shazam, next year will probably save the DC Universe. And after, whatever the bloggers want to make, whatever the narrative is, they always want to paint it as if the DCEU is losing, as if Warner Brothers is getting ready to pull the plug, even though all of these movies, except for Justice League, have made a shit ton of money. Let's go and start off our Aquaman review. How much...
AKA the movie that should have been worse than it was, according to a couple of critics.
It should have been, if it were cheesier, if it were worse, then it would have been a better movie. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? What do you mean by that?
It's whatever. It's so unprofessional. Just if you ignore everything else, it's just if what you say is like the art form that I judge and study and critique, what I want to see is something fail so that I can get more publicity, so that I can have more fun tearing it down. It's just unprofessional. Like, take a long, hard look.
So you get more clicks, right? Because that's really what it's about. And that's what blew me. There's no... It reminded me of the way that they're talking about the Joaquin Phoenix Joker film, and that their worst criticism at the time when they first revealed it, when we first got the footage of Joaquin, which this movie looks incredible, by the way, but they were saying, oh, what is this, fucking old man Joker? And it's like, oh, is that all? All right, then we're good. Like, that's the worst they had. And with Aquaman, now they're saying, if it were just cheesier and worse, then I think it would have been better. It's like, you guys have that's what you're going to go into. And like, you're a critic. Like there are other things that I'm going to point out myself that are legitimately problematic with the movie that you're not focusing on. Instead, they're creating non-issues.
And it feels like they want it to be that joke that it's been in the zeitgeist for forever, since the Super Friends. And because it's not, they suddenly have just this indignation that it should have been worse. It's just ridiculous.
Did you also notice that, and I could not care less about what fucking Rotten Tomatoes says or what the critics are saying, but it's something that should be observed in that the foreign market gave it they had a positive review for the most part, and then as soon as the floodgates were opened for the U.S. markets, the U.S. critics and the U.S. bloggers, that's when you started seeing the score go down. Does that not right there spell the bias that U.S. reviewers and bloggers have against Warner Brothers?
100%. I mean, I haven't opened or gave a click to Rotten Tomatoes in years at this point. And I don't read any critics review, whether it's good or bad. I just don't read it anymore. It's just not worth it, especially since it could paint my own bias, or it could put me in a bad mood, or it could put me in it could put me in a good mood and make me look at things differently than I normally would. It's just, a lot of these people, they're not really critics. They're just reviewers, and they want some kind of clout, but they never earn it.
It makes me wonder how easy it is to be counted in Rotten Tomatoes. Like it's like, can we actually tip the scale in the other direction, or at least balance it out some? Like, what's it really take to be considered into Rotten Tomatoes, which obviously Warner Brothers does take some a strong look at, because to them it seems to affect they think it affects their box office. But as we saw, when they try to please the bloggers or reviewers that are never going to be happy, that already have it's already an uphill battle with them, so fuck them. But when they try to do that, then you have Justice League, which ends up being their lowest, earnings in the DCEU, and also the one that is most like what these bloggers wanted. It's jokey, it's light, it's a popcorn flick, it's a Marvel movie, and that still wasn't good enough. So that should have told them right there, don't worry about that. Just retain the audience that you have, retain the fans, and placate them.
And yet all of these people will continue to go to that website. And to sort of give a little bit of insight on how easily that's changed. Years ago, I used to listen to the Adam Carolla podcast, and for a while, I don't know if he still does or not, but he had the runner of Rotten Tomatoes, Mark something, I can't remember his name, as a guest regularly. They would discuss movies and play movie games, stuff like that. And he would consistently talk about how well his movie, Adam Carolla, would talk about how well his movie was received and how there's all this positive criticism towards it. And then he'd point out, there's this review that's basically nothing. It's a flat, empty review. And at times he would be able to get it removed. There are ways to have some kind of clout or some kind of leverage and get these things removed. They're not all these reviews are not created equal. They're just because it's on there, just because you've gotten enough clicks to earn the minimum needed to post up whatever vomit's coming out of your mouth, doesn't mean that your opinion is really that valid or necessarily correct.
See, that's something I did not know. I did not know that reviews can be taken off if it didn't favor a particular company. And Paul Kelly is actually joining us now. Come on in, Emperor.
Hello.
She's walking in right now.
I'm trying. I'm sorry. I'm almost there.
But just to be clear, it isn't necessarily that I'm saying that you can rub elbows and just get it removed. He had to present a little bit of a case, but it's not impossible. It's really not impossible to get these reviews looked at. I just assume that there's so many, and that they assume that because it's an aggregator and there's formulas and there's stuff like that, they just trust it, which you shouldn't. Don't trust it.
I'm here. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Pulpa Kelly. I'm Jesse.
Hi, Jesse.
Yeah, we just got done doing the Spider-Verse review.
Perfect
so the
timing.
Listeners may have heard a cut there, but Palpa Kelly has arrived.
Here I am.
Much like Almighty in My Hero Academia.
I just palp appear.
Right on time, too, because we were just going into the Aquaman review.
Perfect.
Which you got to see this. I think this is one of the first times in which you can actually join us with another guest.
Yeah, it is. I haven't before. I feel like we've had guests before. It's been a long time, though, since I've been able to be here with a guest.
Yeah, I feel like it might have been since you've given birth. Like, has it not been like over a year?
Yes, it has been more than a year.
Well, now the Broquettes are like, oh shit, now it's almost like a new fighter has joined in Smash Brothers.
A new fighter approaches. What's it say? What's it say?
Yep, that's exactly what it says. A new fighter approaches.
That's not what it says. Stop making fun of me.
All right, so we are going into the Aquaman review, which we were just talking about the bloggers and the reviewers and all the nonsense that we go through that I think Jesse and I pay closer attention to than the palpiness. She just goes into the movie, she enjoys them or she does not. And in this case, she got to come out and see Aquaman on day one. And did you go, Jesse, opening day for Aquaman?
I mean, if you ask my job, no, I didn't.
He was sick on opening day.
If you check the footage, I might have been there.
Sounds like a wise decision to me.
The next day, like, hey, Jesse, did you get to see Aquaman? Yeah, and no. But I feel like I might have liked it.
I was, and then I wink at them. I was seasick. Get it? And they're like, "We don't live by the ocean." I was like, "Seasick, get it?"
Wink,
It's
wink.
really awkward.
So Aquaman was directed by James Wan, who really, really made a name for himself with Saw. It's one of those pieces of work that, like, when he passes, that's going to be one of the movies that they're going to mention in his article or his obituary, whatever it is, in the Academy Awards when they mention in memoriam. It's going to be probably a clip of Saw. Written by David Leslie Johnson, who worked on The Conjuring 2, which James Wan also worked on. We have a couple writers here, though. We've got Will Beal from Castle. My buddy, Jeff Johns.
Yeah, your buddy.
Who wrote Titans, which recently wrapped up season 1. And finally, also written by James Wan, who co-wrote The Conjuring 2.
It starred Daniel, right here, your host.
That's right.
As well as Jason Momoa from Stargate Atlantis, of all things for you to pick.
Well, stunt doubles. And your dad likes Stargate.
He loves Stargate.
Do you like Stargate,
My
Jesse?
dad also liked Game of Thrones. Why didn't you pick that one?
Game of Thrones is good, too.
All right, whatever.
Well, what would you have gone with, Omni?
Saturday Night Live hosting. I think that's what I would've gone on.
He killed it on SNL.
I never
Very
saw him on
funny.
SNL. I didn't even know he was on there.
He brought back Drogo, as well as, like, there's some cross-dressing going on.
Perfect.
He killed it on SNL, and on his YouTube channel, he showed off a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, and you could just tell that he had a fucking blast doing it. And he mentioned on there that that's one of his things that he wanted to do before he died, and now he's there. He wanted to be a regular cast member as he was up and coming on SNL, but now he got to host it.
We also have Amber Heard starring in the movie. She was from The Rum Diary.
And Willem Dafoe, I put down Spider-Man as his credit, but
Good.
American Psycho. Like, he was the detective in one of my favorite movies, American Psycho.
We also have Patrick Wilson, who was in Watchmen, played Night Owl.
Hell yeah, man. You got to put Watchmen, right? Where do you stand on Watchmen, Jesse?
The book or the movie?
Both. Like, I mean, I think the opinions are the same.
I love him. I really do. It took me a really long time to really grasp what was going on in there. I think it's because I read Watchmen too young. So I didn't really have an analytical mind at the time. But over a couple of rereads and watching the movie, I really enjoy Watchmen. It's fantastic. And Patrick Wilson did a great job as Night Owl.
The other star in this was, of course, Nicole Kidman. And I put her credit as Eyes Wide Shut because I love that movie also, but I guess she's most known for Moulin Rouge?
Yes, Moulin Rouge. Wasn't she also in, like, Australia or something like that?
With Hugh Jackman.
She's from Australia. I thank you very much.
But wasn't there a movie called Australia with Hugh Jackman?
I'm pretty sure I'm right.
And she was in it. Okay.
What is she? What Moulin Rouge? And that's really what people remember her for, right?
That's all I remember.
Everybody
her for.
knows her, but
yeah, but we don't know where we remember her from.
I think the first movie I ever saw her in was in Batman Forever, where she was trying really hard to seduce Val Kilmer.
Gross. Who wants to seduce Val Kilmer?
Hey, man. Leave Val Kilmer alone.
He's the Saint. I thank you very much.
Yes. And he was in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, one of my favorite movies.
Man, that was a really awkward performance from her in Batman. I don't blame her, but I rewatched it when the DC Universe launched. What an awkward movie.
Oh, she was in The Others. People
That's
saw
true.
The Others.
That was kind of a hit, but it was soon forgotten. As of December 23rd, Aquaman has grossed almost $500 million. We're at $488.2 million worldwide and has surpassed every single solo Marvel film in the Chinese box office, which is a massive market.
Just have to throw in those Marvel movies there.
Of course I have. Everyone knows what they're fucking listening to.
According to Sci-Fi Wire, Jason Momoa already has ideas for a sequel, and the studio was reportedly enthusiastic over them.
Let me ask you something, Jesse. The whole Chinese box office thing and the fact that the first 6 DC movies have made more money than the first 6 Marvel movies. Do you think that's a valid fact? Or do you think it's a product of superheroes being the new action films?
I'm not sure. I only have that hesitation because now that I'm sort of put on the spot, now that I'm thinking about it, Warner Brothers has had a great relationship with the Chinese market. I remember for Dark Knight specifically, they made a big deal about filming over there and having a big scene over there. And I think there are a lot of other examples that are just not coming to mind where they just have a good relationship with that audience. I'm glad that the audience there loves these movies. I love their movies. I grew up on like the Shaw Brothers and a bunch of kung fu movies. So like it's all just wonderfulness for me.
Do you think part of it has to do with James Wan directing it?
Probably. That's a pretty good
Just a little bit.
maybe.
It didn't hurt.
The war is coming to the surface, whether you like it or not.
Very much like Into the Spider-Verse, the way we're going to break it down is, again, in story, acting, directing, and special effects. And since Jesse chose the 5 out of 5 in Spider-Verse, which you did pointing fingers based on the post-credit scene, what are we going to do for Aquaman? Out of 5 what?
My man.
Out of 5? There you
My
go.
man's.
Did he have a line like that in the movie?
I don't think in this one.
Damn.
No.
Like, that's a signature thing. He had a redheads, gotta love him. But I heard
he
that was
did have
improvised.
Oh, and it was a great improvisation.
But I wanted us, oh yeah, or we got plenty of Chahus, right? Plenty of those.
I think you're confusing him with Maui from Moana.
No, well, he has one of those.
Oh,
in
he
Justice
did.
League.
He did have
here
one
too.
Chahu. There was also Kakamora. I'm sorry. Let's keep moving into the review.
All right, out of 5, my man. So let's go first into the story itself, which might be for me, and I don't know if I'm going to disagree with both of you here. I might have the most negative review out of us 3, but to me, the plot was the weakest part of the film.
Papa Kelly, do you want to go second?
Sure. I'll go ahead. I can see where you would definitely feel that way because there were moments, I know I turned to you a few times in the movie and I was just like, so how did this happen? How'd they get out of the desert? How'd they do this? So I can see that. The thing that I will give it props for was that first 15 minutes of the movie where I sobbed like a baby. You forgot about that. How could you forget? Because I turned to you seeking comfort and you just handed me a tissue as the tears rolled down your face.
Is there no comfort in tissues?
And so I just sobbed silently and the guy next to me was probably like, who is this fucking idiot?
Brutal.
Look, man, I'm in the film. I'm in the whole art, but I was crying too. Like I had the single man tear, and
there were more than one tears.
Well, by the end of it, for sure. But
after you used that tissue to sop them up,
and then handed it to you, like use this.
And you took
one.
it back.
No, but that opening bit, right? I think, and there's some weak points to it, but with Atlanta coming in and washing up on shore, which we don't know how that happened, do we?
She was escaping her arranged marriage and they shot her in the side and she was dying.
Okay.
She washed up on the shore.
Well, she washed up on the shore, ended up falling in love with Arthur's dad. And we
Tom.
did get that
Tom.
bit of buffoonery of like, oh, here hijinks, she's eating the goldfish. And I was just like, all right, let's dial that back a little bit. And then
I have a thought on that. When
go ahead. What? Jump right in.
I like jokes like that, not because it stands on its own, but because it pays off later. Because Mira ate the rose
She
because
did.
she was confused.
It came full
So it's
circle.
mirroring their courtship.
Oh, I just got chills. That was perfect.
That's also, if I can take it to Marvel for just a second, it's also the only joke that I liked in Thor Ragnarok, which I don't know if I'm gonna get any hate for that.
It's fucking there were no funny jokes in that, but go ahead.
The only joke was when he's trying to calm the whole down. He's like, the sun's setting. It's like, oh, I remember that. That's funny. That's a good callback. And then later on, it paid off because when they were in the ship, he saw the video recording of Black Widow, the sun is setting. So that made me enjoy that particular joke quite a bit. So I like those callbacks.
Something you pointed out though is they kind of made it seem, they said, and I think this is a fault of either the writing or the directing, in that they set up this scene of like, oh, there's unfamiliarity with the surface. It's like, all right, cool, we get that, but then now she can understand them and she's speaking perfect English. But the way they set up that scene is, it made it seem as if she would not have known the language, but then she just jumps right in. I feel like there should have been at least a little bit of communication early on, just so that it's not as obvious when they do start to speak of like, hold on a second, why weren't they communicating?
Well, even if they did something brief like they did in Wonder Woman, where she's just like, oh yeah, I've read all these books, I know all these languages. It's not unrealistic to think that in Atlantis, yes, they have all of this knowledge that they use, right? And so they could have easily done something like that, and they didn't. And, I don't think the average person would catch it or care. It just stuck with me.
Also, there's a lot of innate xenophobia for Atlanteans. So when she came up, she may not have wanted to talk, or she may not have respected the language. There's all kinds of reasons you could give for that. I will say, though, that if I had my druthers, it wouldn't have been like a 10 to 15 minute sequence. I would have just ignored the rest of the Aquaman movie and just made a movie of Tom and Atlanta's courtship. Like, I fell in love with that. I was like, oh, I want to see what they do. What's their first date going to be like? How's he going to introduce her? What's going to happen when he tries to get her some legal papers? All these things. I was like, oh, can we go back to them? I want to see what they do.
And then you end the movie with the end of that 15 minutes where she's like, I gots to go, guys. And then like,
I would have broken my heart if that's how the movie ended.
That would have been terrible.
And that's something that I did give a pass on the movie on. It's like, all right, they fell in love. Like, I was just like, that's fine, because the movie made a point of time passed and they grew to love each other. And that's something that Arthur was saying in his narration of, over time they fell in love with each other, and then they had me. And then he's the representation of both sides and both worlds. But that's where I did not expect it. It was like, Pixar's Up all over again, where it's like in the first goddamn part of the movie, I'm crying and I'm weeping. And I don't know if that's because Kelli and I are parents now, but maybe that got you too as well, Jesse. But we've known these characters for such a small amount of time, but they did such a good job overall in the setup of this family unit that we have danger with the guards coming in and trying to get Nicole Kidman back underwater, Atlanta. And then now she has to leave. She has to leave this family. She has to leave this little boy, this baby, essentially. Like, yeah, it's a kid, but it's like, it's her baby.
It's her baby.
And we were, shook by this. Like, it really hit us in the core.
It didn't devastate me, but I did have some, I did well up a bit, just because it's like, you're going to leave your baby. Don't leave your baby.
And the baby was crying in the corner. Somebody grab the baby. Oh, no.
Yeah. And I was like, well, and I don't know if we want to talk about it now, but when she took on those Atlantean guards,
yeah.
Oh my God, that was so cool.
Badass.
So cool. But yeah, if they're just going to keep coming and they have to leave their home and she has to make Tom give up his life, I mean, I could see. Like, she has to do what she has to do.
And I love that the Twitter marketing, what they did, and it's something I pointed out to you, and this is something that's ignored by a lot of these MCU sheep and by a lot of the media. But, there's that scene of her taking down that guard, and she takes the fucking trident and puts it through him and lifts him up, slams him against the ceiling and drops him, right? Later on, like maybe 10 minutes later, you see Arthur take down a guard very similarly in the submarine ship. And then the marketing was brilliant in that they spliced the two scenes together and they said, like mother, like son.
the DC universe, the DCEU, has this pattern of setting up these very strong female characters, these strong characters that happen to be female, and they're highlighted and they're integral parts of the story. All of these DC males and females with Wonder Woman involved too. They're mama's boys. They set up the
Right.
moms to be so important and special and strong and integral to a part of their life. In BVS, you see with Superman, he's broken down by Lex Luthor, taking his mom, and then Batman, his PTSD is brought up with the Martha name. So all of this goes back and fits that same pattern that we've had in these movies, aside from Justice League, and I'm not counting the fucking Mother Box. And it falls into that. And I feel like there's not enough credit given to Warner Brothers or the DCEU for that.
I think a lot of it has to do with the source material. In the DC comics, there's a lot of stories mined from parental relationships, and I think that they bring that to the films in a very tactful way.
And moms are awesome.
Yeah, the moms are awesome.
Shout out to moms.
Big ups to mom.
But more about the story instead of just that 15 minutes.
Yeah, we do learn that as the film kind of continues, that Atlanta gave the task of raising Arthur to be formidable by his Atlantean side through Volko. She entrusts Willem Dafoe with, you need to probably watch over him as well, because it's like, that's one part that you can take into of, okay, yeah, she went back into her world, but what's to stop this army from finding this half-breed and killing him? And I think Volko is a lot of that. I think he's a huge part of Arthur's protection.
I did like the scenes that we got to see with him, even though they aged him down, it looked a little weird.
Yeah.
But where you can tell that he's really trying to teach Arthur, and then the moments they had in there where he's constantly asking about his mother, like his whole life, that's who he's looking for. Oh, right in my gut.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful relationship, and I have a lot of bias in this, I guess, because I love the New 52 Aquaman. That's where I was introduced to him and really not like first introduced. I watched all the cartoons and stuff growing up, but where I really started paying attention to him, and a lot of this story is mined from those stories. Except that I think in sense of a guardian, Volko was, I think in the comics it was more Dr. Shin and his dad that were teaching him, but I'd have to go back and check that out.
Yeah, Dr. Shin wasn't a villain as he's set up in the film, which I thought was interesting because that's a Jeff Johns creation, and in this he co-wrote the film as well. So I thought that was he's Katie who I don't know who that is.
Okay. I gotcha.
And at the end, he's set up as this villain, and
Right.
in the comic he works alongside Arthur, and is pretty much his best friend, isn't he?
Well, it's kind of weird because he wants to know, what he really wants is to know more about Atlantis and to uncover those mysteries. In the second arc of the Aquaman stories by Jeff Johns, he does hire Black Manta to hunt down Aquaman.
Oh,
mainly for research, but I mean, Black Man is kind of a crazy person, so he's like, as long as I'm here, I might as well kill him.
I'm touching on Black Manta's story real quick and his role in it. I thought that they set him up very well, and I mean, they gave him a realistic reason to want to do what he did. I will say, so at the very end, right, like, they have that huge fight. I was expecting him to come back at the end.
Yes.
And then when he didn't, I was pretty happy that he didn't, because I felt it would have really muddied what happened there right at the end to now have this other villain showing up like, oh, now you gotta fight me.
Well, the only thing is it took away from the weight of his character. I felt like the fact that we did not see him again. Sure, he nearly, killed Arthur, but by not having him as a part of the final arc in some form, I feel like it
set him up for the next movie.
Yeah, and sure, that's what they're doing, but I never felt like he was a threat by the way that he was written or even portrayed. And I really liked the way his motivation, absolutely. And it's again, going back to the family aspect that the DC Universe does so well. And I think that could have been a controversial bit to the whole universe. And it's not a controversy I've seen online. So it seems like most people are okay with Arthur going, no, that guy's an asshole. I'll let him die.
Let the ocean decide.
Yeah, it's exactly what he did, and it could be argued that that's also a part of Arthur's arc, right, where he's not just a king, but he transitions into a hero. Do you think that Aquaman by the end of the film might have saved, Daddy Black Manta if the the whole thing was reversed?
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's another thing that they pulled from the comics. He is the reason that Black Manta's dad dies. I think in the New 52 comics, Black Manta causes Tom to have a heart attack. He dies. Aquaman's mad. He finds his ship and he stabs him. And then when lightning flashes, he realizes that he stabs Black Manta's dad. So in the comics, he does straight up murder him. And if you're reading some past stuff, there's the others or like his earlier years where he does kill. He's totally fine with that. He's not a Batman where it's against his code or nothing. He is a person that has murdered or been the cause of murder.
Yes, overall, I think Black Manta's arc, it seems like you both were overall positive with it. What would you think, Jesse?
Yeah, I have to say that I do disagree with that he didn't feel dangerous. I think he did feel dangerous. He gave it looked like second or third degree burns to Arthur. He was destroying everything around him. He was an immediate threat. He cut a huge gash into his back. I mean, Arthur was messed up lying in that boat, and he has Atlantean healing. And that's what makes a good Black Manta story, is that he feels dangerous, whether he's taking on Aquaman or not. He needs to feel like a real threat, like somebody that is going to take that extra step that you don't want him to take. And I felt like he was a threat here, but if it wasn't portrayed to you, I mean, I can't make you feel anything.
Yeah. The other thing too, and we don't have a category for the soundtrack, and maybe we'll go into it a little bit more when we go into the, I guess, special effects or directing, but what was like that fucking Cure song that was playing when he was setting up his armor? I'm like, what the fuck is this, Brandon Lee? What's going on here? Like, it's like that's the one bit that I was like, what the hell is going on? And then, and I understand why they did the whole bit of like, oh, the helmet got separated, and this is why the helmet is so fucking white. It's like, we don't need that. Just give us the classic helmet. Like, I don't feel like the general audience went, oh, so that's why his helmet is so, football shaped. It's like, they don't care. They just want to see Black Manta, and he looks fucking cool as is.
He did. He looked really cool.
The costumes are on point in this movie. It's ridiculous.
If any of that was CGI'd, aside from the creatures, of course, but like the armor and all of that, I could not tell. It looked like practical effects.
I think Orm's mask was probably CGI, but I loved it.
When he put it on the first time, at least. Because you notice he put it on and went like, and wrapped around his head.
Yeah, he would scrunch his eyes and the metal would be malleable.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of emotion in that mask, which I loved. That's not a complaint from me at all.
It looked fantastic if it was CGI, which it probably was. So.
And that's comic book as fuck right there.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I love that we're away from like the black leather and things have to look tactical, and it's just like, no, this is a big piece of orange chainmail. Like, we're just gonna put it on him.
He picked it off a dead guy. So. Yeah,
it's his now. Finders keepers.
Did he just like leave the rest of his clothes down there for the Kraken? Was he just like, here's my clothes?
I'm sure he wasn't going to take Atlan's boxer briefs.
He really
just the necessities.
They did mention Steppenwolf at a very not a throwaway line, but it kind of connects the movie to the rest of the universe. I think Mara mentioned that it was like a year ago that they had fought Steppenwolf. There was definitely time progression between this film and Justice League.
Yeah, I'm fine if they limit it as much as possible.
Well, yeah, but I do like that there was at least a callback. So all these people pretending that this is like a clean cut from these fucking movies. It's like, no, this is a DCEU film. As much as they don't want to admit it, this is a part of that universe. Batman exists.
Thing?
Of course that's a fucking thing.
Oh my goodness.
Of course. They think that this is the death of the DCEU, the fact that Aquaman exists. It's like, get the fuck out of here.
You know what? I will say it is refreshing to see that that's what people are saying, and they're not making fun of Aquaman for being Aquaman. Like, we've come a long way. That's for Aquaman fans.
You remember Robot Chicken? Poor Aquaman.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll take that victory. They may think that they're being smart or snarky, but it's like you're ignoring the fact that you actually respect the hero now.
Here's one thing, though, is I don't consider myself an Aquaman fan, but there is an old subscriber at the previous shop I worked at. He used to cosplay as Aquaman. He had the Injustice suit that he made. He had the traditional. He had all of that. And for years, he would cosplay as Aquaman. And as soon as the first image hit of Momoa as the Batman v Superman Aquaman, he had a fit, right? He would come in and give
all these reasons and responses as to why Aquaman needs to be blonde haired, blue eyed, and white. And he's like, in this story, they specify that this is why they're like this. And this story, and I'm like, holy shit, man. Like, I get it. Aquaman fans probably should be upset, but at the end of the day, they're upset about how the character looks.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with the character. But then he argued that it does have to do with the character because of this story and this story and this story. So I don't know. I feel like
there are no
Aquaman
moms.
fans,
No moms are arguing.
well, no women anywhere.
No women are
Or men.
arguing about the way Aquaman looks.
Do you think Aquaman fans are? Jesse? Do you know any Aquaman fans, maybe bigger than you, that might have had some issues with this?
I personally don't, and I will say I am an Aquaman fan. Like, I'm totally fine with them changing that up. Like, I don't know, and I am hesitant to call them fans. I don't know if it's just like, if it's too precious to them. Because I mean, by changing the way that he looked, I mean, the guy probably felt like something was taken from him on some level, which speaks more to him than it does to the character. But he doesn't need to be a white blonde guy. I mean, he can be whatever the story needs him to be. It's not like it holds any real significance. I mean, to begin with, he's an Atlantean. Atlanteans can be whatever you want because they're not real.
Right.
So it shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah, I thought that was just interesting. But like I explained to him, and I feel like it was an important step in Warner Brothers developing this particular character, is they really needed to have a drastic change from the traditional, because I feel like Aquaman was a bit of a joke among at least the casual readers or even the non-readers, because of the perpetual joke of, Robot Chicken and then the Super Friends. And then New 52 was very clear in saying, no, I don't talk to fish. I control them. And that's something that Jeff Johns was also trying to do, and kind of reinventing or having his own rebirth of Aquaman with the New 52. And I feel like the drastic change of having him be a Polynesian actor and having, the tattoos be a part of the culture of the human side of Arthur, I thought was really important in kind of reinventing the character for many audiences. And it definitely paid off, because people are not making fun of Jason Momoa as Aquaman.
Oof,
in fact,
no.
they're expecting now, and I have an issue with this as a comic shop, worker, but they're pointing at the Aquaman statues and saying, that doesn't look like Jason. So he's almost becoming the standard now for most people.
Well, I mean, that's going to be their Aquaman then, which I think is fine. All that we got to do is, like, you know what? There were stories before that, and he looked like this, and now we have this Aquaman. Let's enjoy them both.
Right around the center part of the story, we got the introduction of Orm, who is our DC villain in this movie, which I have felt that the DC villains have been stronger than most standard comic book movies, and even just going into the Nolanverse, all of those villains are really strong. And now with the DCEU, of course, I still think Zod, and some might argue that Batman, are the strongest villains in the DCEU so far. How do you guys feel that Orm stood as far as his story arc in this movie, or even as a film character?
I thought it was pretty cool. They highlighted his motivation very well, especially when you got to the end and Mama came out and she's just like, this is what you've been taught and it's not okay. And that's essentially what it was. This is what he had been taught his entire life and thought that this is what he needed to do. And so, I mean, he was cool.
Man, Orm is crazy handsome.
See, I was just thinking he wasn't for me, so I don't know.
A lot of women on Twitter are that water is from my pussy. Like, they're saying
You get dehydrated.
Who tweets these things? What Twitters are you following?
I just see the retweets, Kelly. I just see the retweets.
I just wanted to point that out. Also, most of these people in this movie are like crazy beautiful. It's ridiculous
yes.
how great looking this cast is. Somebody complained online about the man bun. It's like they're underwater.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I'm okay with it, but
that saves money.
If he didn't have it, like, his hair would just be flowing everywhere, like a certain half-breed Atlantean we know.
Yeah, and it was great.
Yeah, sure. But that was most of the budget.
It probably was. Mara's hair flew everywhere. She only had her hair pulled back once.
We're not in this house. We don't judge Mira.
Okay.
No, and then Orm as a character, he was a great villain. I really think that he stands out because he isn't nefarious in the things that he does. He is a little bit treacherous because he's lying to other kingdoms and stuff, but it's all in pursuit of bettering his country. So in that sense, I think that he holds a lot of weight. He isn't cackling or anything like that. It isn't a selfish reason that he's doing it. Also, it speaks to a lot of the Aquaman mythos that they are very old-fashioned and brutal in the ways that they handle themselves. I mean, he let them sacrifice his mother because she broke the law. That's not something that really holds for most country or most civilizations that we're aware of these days, but it really stands it should really stand out that he's not bad. He's just doing what he was taught.
The one part of the story that I initially felt that was a weak part of the writing until Dolph Lundgren's character actually says, I fucking knew that, is with the submarine sacrifice. It's like, this is too fucking obvious, right? Like, as anyone that knows the structure of a story or has even seen enough movies, you're like, of course Orm is setting this up, right? And if we had not gotten the one line of Lundgren going, no, yeah, maybe I knew about that already, or it was obvious to me, but I want this war to happen too. Like, he was just waiting for an excuse of, it's like, well, I was almost killed by Orm's shenanigans, but, I agree with him.
Let's go fight the surface world.
But if it weren't for that, I would have felt that scene was a little bit weak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, and something we're probably both going to be coming back to is that in this movie, if you are going to look at anything that stands out negatively, it's that there are contrivances. Like, things just happen to happen at a certain time that's just beneficial, and we're just going to move on from there, which I think fits for the genre, because I don't think that people complain about contrivances in like Indiana Jones movies or Star Wars movies, but I think that's just a staple of the genre. And for me, I'm generally accepting of them, but for others, it might not be good enough, which I don't blame them.
And that's where I felt the story kind of jumped around a little bit too much for me, is that sometimes I wanted to be an adventure movie, and then sometimes I wanted to be a horror film, and then sometimes I wanted to be like this gladiator film, and then it was a romance, which I felt was a little bit forced, honestly.
No,
like, yeah, I know
the romance was great.
I know they went on this little journey, but then it's like, oh, she fell into his arms. Oh, they're going to hold hands, but they're not really wanting. It's like, don't give me those fucking tropes,
that wasn't
man.
for
Do
you.
better.
That was for me. That was for the women. Jason Momoa and that part of the story was for the women.
You don't think women deserve better than that?
I'm just saying women enjoyed that.
Also,
great romance.
I'm in the camp with Papa Kelly. Like, it was for me too.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed their romance. It obviously wasn't a part of, well, it's not like a traditional romance where, the story's all about them. It's something where they're sort of earned together, and it's just forged in time, because they were gone for a while. It wasn't just a day or two. They were traveling together for a while. And they do have a bit of trust from the Justice League movie, so we know that there's a little bit of history there, and they sort of get to know each other. And she did save his dad. Mm-hmm. They built up, I guess, like in a real relationship, they built up this base on a lot of small things. So it may not have been quite as overt as certain romances should be. Also, if I could just, again, get another movie, it's just Arthur and Mira just dating, I'm totally fine with that too.
And then he ate the flowers too, so she wouldn't feel like an idiot.
That was so cute.
That was so sweet.
Yeah, I was like, I love you. Yeah, I thought I was totally fine with it. And then also, because I have seen some people complain that they feel like it has a bit of an identity crisis, where I think that's on purpose. I think it's a bunch of things on purpose. And for me, because it's a comic book movie, I'm totally fine with them doing all these kinds of weird things. It may not be as cohesive as a regular film, but I'm fine with it.
See, and that's where I differ. Where I would, and I know exactly, as you pointed out, that's exactly why they did it, to appeal to as many people as possible. Mm-hmm. That's why it's a crowd pleaser, right? That's what they were trying to do. They're not trying to, and that's where I kind of object to filmmaking in general. They're not trying to make the best movie. They're trying to make the most appealing movie to as many audience members so that they can make the most money. And I know that's the end game, to make as much money as possible. But I like, if you had
a scene of them, and this is where I wanted a little bit more of, where they're swimming through Atlantis, and you're getting that sort of Blade Runner, Tron Legacy soundtrack through it. It's like, if I had a 10 seconds of them just artificially zooming in the camera on a light fixture as it follows up into the archway of the security, like, that shit is what I live for. Like, just the art of the camera movement. But that's not what they were trying to make, and that's why I have to dock points from it, because it's not trying to be...
That scene with the trench wasn't enough for you? That was
beautiful. Great. That was beautiful. And I wanted, like, and again, if I would have done things a little bit more, it's like, follow the fucking eyeball or the fucking glinting of the skin of some of these creatures based on the red flare that Aquaman is holding, and you hold the camera on that shit for 10 seconds. But I'm a fucking...
All right, Darren Aronofsky, get out.
Not even a
You're
Darren,
done. Jesse and I are going to finish this. We're going to talk about how much we like the movie and how it was perfect as it was.
My point is, that's stuff that I can't let go. Like, I don't know. That's why I harsh the MCU so badly, because they're more crowd pleasers than this one. They're just trying to make it as simple as possible to digest. And it's like, no, I want to think about the movie. I want to keep, and part of that is the trench. Like, that I do think is if we had a whole movie of that's where I will put in my fucking...
Of the trench?
Yes, the fucking trench, and that filming and that whole... Because I feel like that's where James Wan really excels at, and I think that was the strongest scene in the movie.
There is more to them, too. Also, for your fans, if they want to, read the New 52 arc of Aquaman, because if you love the trench, you'll definitely get a lot more from them there. I respect where you're coming from. I don't know if this will... How do I put this? I think your criteria is different than what's necessary for a film like this, but it's not unfair for you to have the expectations that you do.
Right, because of Man of Steel, because of Batman v Superman, because of, even Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman. There's a lot more to try to appeal to the filmmaker as opposed to the general audience. So that's my standard there, is they had set a certain expectation beforehand based on the fact that all these movies connect. And I understand these are different characters and they're not going to be like these, but there was a certain quality to those movies that isn't quite there with Aquaman.
Also, this movie is huge, like in scope, in grandeur, in visuals. There's a lot here, from the history of Atlantis to all the main characters that we have. I mean, even in the show notes, we didn't mention that. What's the name of the actor for Black Manta? Yahya Abdul Mateen, I think.
Yes, I think so.
That, we didn't even mention his full name. I mean, there's so much going on here, and I think that's another reason why I'm forgiving of the quote unquote identity crisis, because I kind of love that the beginning part is a little bit of a love story, and then it's an origin story, and then it's Blade Runner, and then it's Indiana Jones, and then it's Star Wars, and finally it's a duel. Like, I kind of love that it's just an adventure, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
And I think that's the other scene I also really enjoyed, was the duel, but we'll get into that when we go into the actual directing and special effects. Do we have much more to say as far as the story? I mean, we got into the whole... we haven't gotten into Arthur's arc as far as becoming a king or becoming that tie between the surface and his world.
I think that they did that well. I could have stood to see more emotion from that, because it didn't really feel like he was conflicted with who he was. Mm-hmm. And then we got to this moment where he had to change who he was, right? And then he just said, oh, I'm not worthy. I know that I'm not, but this is what I need to do. So I wish we would have seen a little bit more of that confliction that he had throughout. But I didn't think that the transformation particularly felt clunky or anything like that.
I think the transformation was subtle, and it needed to be subtle, because he's an adult man. He's not a teenager. He's not somebody that's growing into these powers. He's been swimming. He's been saving lives. He's fought parademons and a new god. He is who he needs to be, and what changes are the nuances of his character. He still doesn't feel like he's the right fit for it at the end, but now he's excited to at least try. He's got a new family that he's never known before. He sees that there's this grand life out there that he can now be a part of safely and feel welcome. So I think that should we get a sequel, which I'm assuming we are, I'm really excited to see just a lot of him fleshed out.
As far as Mara, I felt that was another weaker story point where what did it take for her to betray, her legacy and her family? It's like, was the greater good of Atlantis really that apparent with Arthur?
But she was, she was thinking like a queen. That's what she was doing. So whereas Orm was thinking like a king and what's best for my nation, she was essentially stepping into the role of about to be queen, right? Because she was engaged to Orm, and she was saying what's best for Atlantis, and it's not what Orm's doing.
Also, she was raised by Atlanta with Orm, so she got the same lessons that he did, but she took her lessons a lot more to heart than he did. Also, we have a bit of history where she is even in Justice League telling him, you have to come back to Atlantis, you have to unite it. She's had faith in him and believed he was the key for longer than this movie.
Where did these people get the idea that he had to be the key, or he had to be the tie to solve the problems of Atlantis?
I think it's in their laws. Because he is the firstborn, he has the right to the throne, and if he takes the throne, then he can put a nix to all of Orm's plans. And because he was raised in two different worlds, he may have some new forward-thinking ideas that Orm and others wouldn't. So the trust was that he is a good person and he can bring the change that we need.
All the lines of her saying, well, if you're really the king, then we're in trouble. Are those just throwaway things of just lighter humor in the film? I felt like there was a lack of confidence there.
No, it was her giving him a hard time because that's part of their love story.
Yeah, he said he was going to pee in front of her.
Yeah.
I mean, she's going to roll her eyes
Fucking
at him.
line. Fucking line. Jesus. Thankfully, there was like two of those in this movie. If it were the MCU, it'd be one every goddamn minute.
Yeah, the humor was handled really well. I did enjoy that as well. But yeah, she's just a person. She isn't there to be a foil or an archetype. She has times where she's nicer. She has times where she's silly. Mm-hmm. She has times where she's serious, where she's enigmatic, where she is being reverent. She's a fleshed out person, which I really love. I would have loved to have seen a lot more of Mira, but not in a pervy way, but just more
Neither of our minds went
Mira.
there. So
Okay. I don't know who's listening. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen that more.
Anything else on the story before we move into the stars of Aquaman?
No,
it was I think it was a basic story, but it was a fun adventure, so I'm fine with it. We
have the star being Jason Momoa, my stunt double, as we said. I don't know, like I felt that I love Momoa, right? I love that they took this direction. That's all credit to Zack Snyder for setting this up in the first place, but I don't feel like, thankfully he had all these other strong actors around him because it's tough. I don't think he carried it by himself.
Well, no, he's not the strongest actor.
He's not the strongest lead or actor. So that's one thing where I felt like, all right, I was paying attention to, Willem Dafoe and even Dolph Lundgren, like King Nearest and Mara, of course. And it's like, I was more interested in those characters. And I don't know if that's a fault of the writing of the movie as far as Arthur Curry, or maybe the lack of range that Momoa might have. And I definitely felt that I did not see that strength in his lead or as a lead.
I could see that. I felt that I could see him enjoying the role, right? I think he had fun playing that character. But yes, I can definitely see what you're saying now that you mention it.
When I watched it, I felt like he did a fine job. I probably need to watch it again and pay a little bit more attention because, like you said, there was a lot of other strong acting going on. I felt like he did fine, but I may not have the same eye you have for actors.
I thought that Amber Heard did really well as Mara, and we've given her praises, especially now. And you said that she has the comedy behind it. She has the loving portion of it too, as a queen, and eventually as her relationship with Arthur kind of develops, and then also as a strong leader of the people and standing up to Orm several times and to King Nearest for the greater good. Yeah, I thought Amber Heard did great, and I liked her part in Justice League as well, as small and possibly rewritten and reshot as it was, and she continued that in Aquaman.
I thought Nicole Kidman was great in the beginning. And I would have liked to have seen more emotion at the end when they reunite, right?
Yeah.
But she was still, like you said, a strong actress.
I wanted to see Jason Momoa weep when they were hugging. Like, I know he put his head down into her like a child would, but it's like a cry, man. Make him cry. CGI some fucking tears. You've already
Because I'm
CGI'd
crying,
this much goddamn
you gotta
water.
cry.
I don't really think Arthur is much of a crier.
But that would have been like the ultimate moment, right? Because through this whole thing, he's not much of a crier, but then he sees his mom after 20 years and he's crying.
Mm-hmm. But no, I thought Nicole Kidman was, and I've seen a lot of criticism against Nicole. I'm
really?
like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, what problem do you have with her? I thought she did fine. And yeah, maybe a little bit more emotion as a mom when she sees her son after so many years. That should have been, that's another scene that would have been way longer. If I had done this
In the
thing.
Daniel cut. Release the Daniel cut.
I think the only piece of bad again, I don't really have a great eye for acting, so I can't speak to it too confidently, but the only part that I saw that I wish would have been reshot or redone, when Manta sees his dad die, he yells out "Dad." I was like, that didn't feel like that was real. Because whenever I think of somebody yelling in anguish, I think of Clark after breaking Zod's neck. That felt real. And that's sort of like my baseline for, okay, if you're going to cry in anguish, it needs to be at least that.
I did like everything before that, though, where he's just in desperation of, I'm not going to fucking leave. I'm not going to go. And he's like, well, no, you have no choice. I'm going to fucking kill myself. So, I mean, you're not staying around
you
for
gotta
nothing.
go now.
Like, I thought that was awesome.
The setup, the dialogue, the banter, like it all felt good. It's just that one line where he's like, "Dad." That felt like it was acting. Yeah. Also, at the end, when after the duel, when all of them are united, I'm pretty sure they're all standing on a big green bubble. Like I don't blame them that much. I mean, I'm sure they did the best they could.
Which part are you referring to? The actual ship, or
they're fighting on top of the big spinny thing, right?
Yeah.
The final fight between Aquaman and Orm.
Yeah, and then after everything's settled and they're all just sort of talking to each other and it's getting ready for the final shot, I wasn't expecting Academy Award acting there because I'm sure they're all standing in a big green room.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go into Willem Dafoe and finally Patrick Wilson as the big villain in the film.
Daniel, I prefer to think of him as Willem the Friend. Thank you very much.
Instead of Dafoe. You can have my job. I'm done. He passes.
It's a different role than what that I'm used to, at least. I mean, it was probably closer to the detective in American Psycho that we've gotten, but it's a mentor. It's kind of a double agent at the same time, and not the villain. Like, maybe it's because of this staple that he's had over the years, or the strong roles that he's set up throughout his acting career, that I'm like, I half expected some kind of churn in his character. Like, wait a second, is he going to be the true Ocean Master or something weird like that? But
no, not Volko.
He ended up being a strong lead for Amber and Jason to kind of play off of. I think there was so much of him in the movie, and I was glad.
I thought his character was very realistic too, because somebody in that position, right? You can tell he didn't approve of the things that Orm was doing, but he was still just kind of going along and redirecting him where he needed to. And then at the end, when, it came to, I know what you're fucking doing, he's like, yeah, and he's twice the man that you'll ever be. And I was like, all right, good for you.
If we're talking about like Willem Dafoe tropes, I'm surprised he didn't die, because that dude dies in everything.
All the time. No,
John Wick, Green Goblin, like he's just always dying.
He went and gave him a room with a view.
Yeah, I'm glad Orm. I was expecting Orm to, off him, but he didn't. I was like, oh, Orm's not too bad. He's all right. He's not as ruthless. Patrick Wilson, I think I loved him in Watchmen. Did an awesome job, and a lot of people had high expectations for him in Aquaman as Orm. There was nothing in that performance that I don't believe him. Like, all of that was definitely Orm. It was the Ocean Master. His motivation was very clear, as misguided as it may have been based on where you stand on these particular politics. The whole bit of him, and this is one thing I did want more of too, is we get a scene of Arthur and Orm talking, and he's like, yo, I always wanted to meet you. You were my brother. And it's like, don't tell me that. I want to see that. I want to see that relationship. And we didn't get that. Instead, it was given to us. And he's, yeah, I felt that way too, but you're the, what do you call him? Like the half-breed brother that is not really related, but we are. I don't know. Like, it was so kind of forced in that slight scene before the big fight that I wanted to see that relationship really develop, as opposed, cut one of those fucking action scenes and give me more of that. But that's not Patrick Wilson's fault. I thought that he worked really well with the script and what he was given.
Except for his weird ocean bun. Yeah.
Leave it alone.
I don't like, it was like a fish fin. I don't know. Wasn't for
It's
me.
fine.
Maybe
Whatever.
that was on purpose then, because maybe that's just a fashion choice of Atlanteans.
Well, it's stupid.
So for the record,
tell that to my low-rise jeans from 2002.
2002 was a great year.
in the end, Palpa Kelly says, not attractive.
Hashtag
Brutal.
no way Orm.
I think that wraps it up for the actors, our overall thoughts on that. Directing and special effects, I think this is where, once again, just like Spider-Verse, it's being hailed. The one thing you see positively with all of these reviews is that the special effects, see it on the biggest screen possible, see it in IMAX, the spectacle of the underwater scenes is incredible, and all of that. James Wan, first off, as a director, were you guys on... Did you guys feel, I know you guys are okay with it being a different movie, but did you feel that his directing was inconsistent in portions as I might have?
No, I felt like the direction was pretty cohesive, even if the genres didn't feel that way. It always felt like a James Wan movie to me.
I could see, I see and understand what you're saying, because there's some scenes that you look at it and it's gorgeously cinematic, right? And it's just something that you want to freeze frame and digest for a long time, in this small portion. And then there's other moments where they did film it like a,
Fast and the Furious film.
Right,
sure.
a standard action movie, or, whatever you want to call it. But I would say as a whole, I felt that it flowed very well together. There have been movies that we've seen where it, again, just feels clunky and doesn't feel like it works well together. And I say, oh, well, why did they make this choice? And why? For me, as an average moviegoer, I didn't feel that way throughout. I enjoyed the gorgeous scenes that we got, and then I still enjoyed the other scenes that we got.
What were both of your favorite scenes from James Wan in this?
You go first.
Oh, man. I have to pick one?
Yes.
Yes, one.
One.
There was...
One.
I have to pick my one? Oh, man. That sucks. That sucks so hard. I guess it has to be...
There's one right answer.
If we're going to keep it really simple, like no special effects, nothing really that hard, I really love the opening scene where it's raining on the coast and Atlanta's body is on the shore, because it has I remember it very specifically, like it's very vivid in my head. It opens with the Dutch angle on a rain-swept patter of a window, just bouncing and bouncing, and you see Tom. And he shows up, and it's just his back, and then he looks down. And it's a very powerful shot. And you see what he's seeing, and he brings her in, and I love that scene. If we're talking something simple, something well shot, that's what I love. And then if we want something with a whole lot of spectacle, it has to be the underwater, the duel at the Ring of Fire for me. It's so cool.
I will
There's
say,
also I can't pick one. It's hard.
While I'm thinking about it, that first scene where he's tying the rain shutter because it keeps flapping.
Sure.
The whole time I'm like, that's a rain shutter, you idiot. Close it. Like, that's what it's there for. But whatever.
See, I was thinking, why did he look over to his right and behind him? There was no noise. Like, there was no reason for him to ever discover
It was love.
Atlanta.
He felt love, Daniel.
Yeah,
He
it
did
was
not
love.
feel love. Like, if one simple change would have been if he did a double take. You know what I mean? Like, just oh wait, I saw something out of the... That little tiny bit would have made me believe it, but the actor just looks over behind his fucking back like, oh, what is that?
But didn't he drop something or something? Like, he looked back that way for a reason.
I don't
Besides
feel like
love.
he did.
I'd have to watch it again.
Yeah,
I think we should all watch it again.
Let's just go watch it again. What was your favorite scene, Daniel?
The trench.
Yes.
Yeah, the trench easily.
Mine
and
too.
Close second would have been when they're exploring the city, if that had been a little bit longer, because that soundtrack really built up the city and the world that they had. If we had spent more time in that, and not so much the far shots that we got, because I felt like it kind of took me out of it a bit. But because we got the trench, because we got silence, because we got minimal soundtrack on those longer scenes of them just traveling deeper and deeper down, and there's tension and never horror. Like I never felt like I was scared in that scene, even though these are scary creatures. It felt more intense than anything. And the whole boat scene, I that was another weak portion. It's like, why aren't they all attacking? This is not their let's go inside the ship. It's like, there's no reason for the trench to just hang outside. Like, ooh, let's hang outside this window. Just crash in there like they started to. But then once they actually dove in, like all of that was done really well. Where you see all of these creatures, you see, you get a close up shot, like an over the shoulder shot of one of these creatures, like looking over as they swim by. Like that was really well done. And I think that was probably my favorite scene. Now that I think about it a little more though, I know we were talking about the green screen in the final fight, but that shot of Orm as he turns around and you see the big, wind or the big sail thing, whatever the big turbine thing is,
yeah, whatever.
The slow motion bit of that and the rain falling on him in that costume, nothing is wrong with that scene. That is a perfect shot.
It's awesome.
I would say my favorite too is probably the trench, but a little bit earlier than you really appreciate it. It's when they first dive off the boat and they're diving down, and you just see all this darkness around them with that red, and then the lightning flashes, and you see it's like half the screen where the boat's above them, but when that lightning hits, you can see all, like, that's the first time I get chills thinking about it because it was just so cool. But that's the first time that you're really like, oh shit, they're everywhere. Or even when they first dive in and you're still up above the boat and it flashes and you just see the ocean is full of them and you're like, oh my god, they're gonna die. I also really enjoyed the scene where Willem Dafoe's teaching him, about his powers, right? And he's going in the ocean, it's getting darker, and he's like, part of your thing is you can see really well in the dark, and the whole ocean just lights up and you see like all the jellyfish and all the colors. The ocean scenes were beautiful.
Yeah, and I thought that was a good explanation to why these things are lighting up. It's like, no, we're seeing this through
their
Atlantean vision.
Right.
Exactly. I was never taken out of the war scenes even. Like
I wasn't even taken out of the scene with the Godzilla, whatever, kaiju.
The Carol laughs? Is Kara something?
Carol. We'll just call her Carol. She was cool. She was like telling all this stuff, and I was like, yeah, you tell him. And he's like, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, whoa, you can understand me? And I was like, oh, we're not supposed to be able to understand her.
The Carathan, Leviathan.
Carol.
Yeah.
She has a name. Carol.
That's true, Daniel. You're not respecting her or her name. I think it's about time that you get on board.
Yeah, that was also really well done, by the way. The fact that you don't get a full look at her until the war scene.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was a smart choice of them. Like, you just see the tentacles or whatever. So that goes to show that she was never really, if she had to kill these guys, minimal effort. She never had to reveal herself.
She was kicking them all away.
Yeah. And
also the fact that we got to see her blew my mind because I thought for sure it was gonna, when I heard that what's her name was voicing her, the Mary Poppins, the original Mary. I was like, oh, it's just going to be in a flashback. She's just recording something really quick, and it's probably going to be in the history of Atlantis. And then she did it there, and I was like, okay, well, they're just going to leave her there because there's no way they can make her escape the maelstrom. And then she showed up and just wrecked shit. Like, I was
killed
totally
all the
on board.
Kakamora.
yeah,
Well,
both sides died.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they shouldn't have been having a war. How about that?
Yeah,
They didn't fight.
I did like that one little Kakamora crab man though. He's like, you can take my armies, but you're still a piece of shit.
I thought he was going to be like, you're a dickbag, and just die.
I liked all the fish people that were like
The
philosophers.
intelligent, yeah.
And Orm was
The
like,
fishermen.
you guys are giant wimps. And they're like, no, we're not. And then he kills them. He's like, tells the little girl, like, you're going to do what I say. Proving that they were fucking giant wimps, philosophers, non-war creatures. Almost became the Ocean Master, though. He got close.
I mean, he put on the costume and called himself Ocean Master.
Well, did he call himself Ocean Master?
I'm pretty sure.
I did like that whole, the scene in the war. Like, I know some people are saying that the war scene wasn't long enough. I felt it was fine.
It was almost too long, but
I was fine with it.
The fact that the they're like, he's controlling the goddamn trench. And then he's like, nah, he's not. And then you see the fucking trench wrecking shit. It's like, holy, like everyone immediately has doubt and has faith in the new king, right? He's riding a fucking kaiju and he's controlling the trench.
Well, even Mara goes up and she's like, Dad, he's got the trident. And Dad's like, nah. And this one guy in the back's like, it's true.
That's true.
He's just like, oh, okay. He's the new king.
He's the new king, everyone. The half-breed.
Also, in the middle of that war when they kissed, like, that's got to be kiss of the year, right?
That's what I was telling you. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it was
You didn't
okay.
feel it?
It was okay.
Well, it's based off a panel. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a piece of art
You want to
that's
know
famous.
why I didn't feel it? Because it took him like 47 years to put his arm around her, right? Like, she was just taking advantage of him and he was just standing there. And I'm like, put your arm around her, make this steamy. Took a while.
Up to that scene? He caught her once, like, whoop.
No, but I mean, like, she leans in and kisses him, right?
Oh, I see
But
what
he
you're
doesn't
saying.
put his arm around her until it's almost over. No.
Yeah, well, if you remember, it's because I pay way more attention to this than I should. She actually, when the camera pans around and he's slowly putting his arm around her, she's wrapping her leg around him.
Oh, I did see that part.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if that wasn't steamy enough for you, but I was like, damn, she wants it.
I mean, she definitely did, but I don't know. I just wanted him to take more initiative.
I mean, the true love, I don't know, I know you guys might disagree, but the true love story for me was Nicole Kidman and Tom, right?
I mean, that was sweet, yes.
It's like we knew it was going to happen. We knew we were going to get that sunset scene of him going down to the dock.
Sunrise.
Fine,
Yeah.
sunrise. Going down to the dock and not seeing her, but then of course she was going to be there. And we saw it and we expected it and we fucking loved it.
Cried again.
You made fun of Nicole Kidman, like going up and seeing him how he is now and going, ooh.
Like going
diving
back into the
down.
ocean.
It's like, it's love, Kelly.
Drives back through the trench.
Oh, yeah, I thought for sure when she saw Arthur, she was going to be like, you look better shaved. I was like, that's such a mom thing to say. I bet she's going to say that.
It would be a mom thing to say. Why'd you let your hair grow out, honey?
That would have been a good bit too, where maybe some more of the Polynesian culture got worked into his origin, and we didn't really get that with his father either. So I don't know. That's one thing I also felt was missing a little bit from maybe the story. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it for special effects, right? Mm-hmm. There were some rough scenes for sure. Like Willem Dafoe's down aging was rough. Like that did not look good in any scene.
But what's his name? They aged him down in the very beginning, and I didn't notice.
Papa Aquaman,
Yeah.
yeah. Like we were, it's like, wait, did they age him up or did they age him down? And until you research it, you're like, no, they aged him down, and he looked fine. There were some portions for sure, many portions in the fights and in the creatures and in the underwater scenes where
Swimming,
it did
yeah.
look incredibly plasticky, especially with the skin tones on a lot of these characters where it's like, that's too glossy, that's too CGI'd. And, it's just a product of the fact that they're filming, they're trying to build an underwater world. And I get that. I just don't feel like the technology was quite there, or maybe the budget wasn't quite big enough to really make this as believable as we've gotten in the previous DC films of aliens invading the earth, of Superman and Batman fighting. Like none of those scenes ever looked too CGI to me, but in this case, there were several scenes in this that looked amazing, that looked gorgeous, and many that looked, rough or poor. So I felt that it was either one side or the other. It was never a healthy medium overall.
In defense of that, I don't think those other movies were doing CGI on this scale. It's wild how much they're building with just computers.
Well, you say that, but there was most of that BVS scene between Batman and Superman. Affleck's not wearing that suit. Like, that's all CGI. And that blew my fucking mind when I learned that it's all like CGI.
Which scene?
Him fighting Superman with the big
Really?
armor. A lot of those scenes,
Yeah.
it's just him and, the little, not the light bulbs, but the little bits. And they just CGI'd all of that over him. And it looks amazing. And the rain and the lighting and all of that. That's like, I never would have learned that as you just did.
Yeah, it's a wild amount of CG in that movie. But remember, in this one, they're not only CGIing the floor that they're standing on and the costumes that they're wearing. It's like I said during the Spider-Verse, everything's on purpose. Everything in the background, the shine, the lighting, all that stuff. I don't think it's fair to compare them, but I'm also not a computer engineer. I don't know what I'm talking about there.
Well, I'm just going again based on what we've gotten in the past and the bar that has been set in the DCEU. And but again, it's not there was I think the worst part of it for me was the story. I think they did well with what they had, right? Like it's really hard to do an underwater film. It's extremely expensive. You have to have a ton of CGI. But I thought that was weaker because of that, because it's tough to do. It's just not as practical as one would hope. But when they did do it well, it was incredible. I don't even know if Arthur had that actual suit or not, but if that was CGI too, that orange, the traditional one,
it
looked
really cool.
phenomenal. It looked perfect. Same with the Ocean Masters and Black Manta for that matter.
Hell yeah.
Any other closing thoughts before we give our rating on Aquaman?
Go see it.
Go see it.
All right, so who wants to start on the final rating for Aquaman? Out of 5, my mans.
I'll go first. So I give this movie 4 out of 5 my mans.
Pretty good. That's pretty high. Any summary on it overall? Just fun movie?
It was a fun movie. I think that it is enjoyable for everyone, including moms. But it gave me a little bit of everything that I wanted to see. It surprised me in a lot of parts. And of course, it had that really touching opening scene, which was very unexpected.
I want to end this on a positive note, so I'll go next.
Okay.
And then Jesse can go.
You're going to give it 2.
Yeah, 2 out of 2 my mans out of 5.
I know you or something.
Not in my top 4 DC EU films.
Better than Justice League.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. But it's also the one right next to Justice League. So it's Aquaman and then Wonder Woman, Suicide Squad, BVS, and then Man of Steel. I still overall had a good time, and there were a lot of issues with it as a movie that I can't forgive. Like, I can't do it. This is why, I have such a hard time with the MCU. And this is still better than most of those films. And it's still better than a lot of comic book movies out there. It's not the best comic book movie of the year. Obviously, we give that, or at least I think we give that to Spider-Verse, although we have yet to hear Jesse's closing thoughts. But, if you want to see some, as we've both said, all three of us have said, Indiana Jones, a lot of action films, a lot of Blade Runner, a lot of Tron, and obviously take your moms and sisters.
Yeah,
and
abs.
Are more women watching this or Wonder Woman? Like, which one?
This. Oh, please, this. Because there's still a strong female character in this.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's also Jason Momoa.
So, that's mine, 2 out of 5.
And I'm coming in hot with an extreme bias at 5 out of 5.
Yay!
My mans. I love the movie. I love what they did. I love what was presented. I'm a huge Aquaman fan. I didn't come into this movie expecting symbolism or an extreme amount of depth. I wanted to see these characters treated well. I wanted to see the universe fleshed out. I wanted to see this world that I wanted to be a part of and spend time in, and I got all of those things. Plus, there is a mid-credits teaser that leads me to be very excited for the future sequel, should there be one.
There you go. Final thing, did you guys spot the Annabelle doll?
The who? The Annabelle doll?
Yeah.
No, because it's terrifying, so I probably plugged it from my mind.
I had to go back and go on Twitter.
Wait. Was it when all the trash was pushed up? I did see it. I saw a doll. I don't watch horror movies, so I didn't know that was the Annabelle doll. But I was like, what the hell is that doll there for? And why is it so prominent?
Right in the center of the shot.
Yeah,
that was the Annabelle doll.
I do remember seeing it.
Yeah, you can find screenshots now on Twitter because I have to go back and say, what scene was she in? And I thought it was maybe in the end credits scene where, like, in that office, like maybe she was tucked away in the corner. But now people have already like gone to the Chinese pirating, and they're like, yep, this is it right here. And you see her, it's like, all right, cool. So next time when you see it, it's in the scene where Mera and Aquaman are taking the ship out. Yeah.
Where they
he's
go,
like, I guess I do smell. No one laughed.
I laughed. I thought it was funny.
I laughed.
It's like, hee. You choked on water because he tried to use his breath. But that would just goes to show like how he lives of two worlds, right? And then it points out that they don't use obviously oxygen when they're speaking underwater.
However y'all want to justify
all right,
it. That's fine.
As long as we're not justifying.
No, again, it was one of two jokes that I was like, nah. But I hope you all enjoyed the double review, longer podcast this week. Final podcast of the year of 2018.
Woo.
We had Palpa Kelly. We had Jesse making his The Reasons I'm Broke debut right here on the show for the final one. And huge thanks, Jesse, for joining us on this double review, for staying on for nearly 3 hours on this podcast as Kelly jumped in and we dove into these movies together. And on top of that, at the time we're recording this on fucking Christmas Eve. So thank you so much, Jesse, for helping us out with this review.
It was no problem. It was my pleasure. Love to do it again whenever you need me.
Where can the Brokehead Core find you if they want to follow you on everywhere that you are at?
You can find me on Instagram at Dishwasher Safe. You can find me on Tinder at 7 Layer Dip. You can find me on JDate at BagelBoy69. You can find me on Yelp also at BagelBoy69. No, I'm just kidding.
Are those not real links? Because I'm
No,
going to
they're
link
not
these in
real
the show
ones.
notes.
Although I think I do want to make an Instagram called Dishwasher Safe, but we'll see what happens. No, I'm on Twitter. You can find me at OmniJam, OMNIJAM. I have my PSN tag there. I have my Switch code there because I am an avid gamer. And hit me up if you ever want to play some games, you want to talk some comics. If you want to fight me, I mean, we can figure something out. We'll see what happens.
There you go. There will be links in today's show notes for the episode in case you're driving and you're not writing these down or texting it to yourself. Just swipe on over to the show notes and you will find links to everywhere you can find Jesse on Twitter, on Switch, and on the PlayStation 4. So thank you all so much for joining us on today's episode. I am, I got to look up the Pokemon trainer. I am Bugcatcher Daniel.
I am Poke Master Palpa Kelly.
Spotlight's on you, Jesse.
Oh, Squirtle.
He's got my job.
That's perfect.
I'm done.
And Brokehead Core, all will be well.